Click,
Someone's not muted.
trying to do that. We're having a little
We're
struggle.
recording. Go ahead.
So this is Anna. Everybody needs to mute on their devices, and Melanie, I think you unmute.
So be patient with us because we have a lot going both here and virtually. So it's going to take some time to process, but we will get to the business. All right, are we ready to go, Superintendent?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start with you with the territorial land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Vice President McCormick, members of the board, community who are virtual and in person. I acknowledge that Santa Rosa City Schools is on the traditional territory and homelands of the Pomo people, traditional territory and homelands of the Coast Miwok people, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This land acknowledgement calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Santa Rosa City Schools more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on to item C2. If everyone could please stand, if able, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're moving on to C3, reporting of actions taken in closed session. This is where I report this, or is it C4? Chanel or Steve? Yes, report it now. Okay, so the board took action to approve settlements in case numbers 2022050631 and 2022050304 by unanimous vote. And we are on C4, items considered in closed session for action in open session. I think we just did that. Yeah? No, none. Okay, all right. Statements of abstention, C5? No, seeing none. Okay, moving on to C6, adjustments to the agenda. Okay, seeing none. Oh, if there are any, could you, if there's anybody here that would like to make a comment on one of our consent items that we can pull, now would be the time to do it. Okay, could we ask that online, virtually?
If there's anyone attending the meeting on Zoom and would like to pull one of our consent items, that's towards the end of the agenda. If there's any agenda item that you would like pulled, please raise your hand at this time. I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, that takes us to C7, public comment on non-agenda items. So we're going to start with the cards that we have here, and then we will, oh, we got some more, great. And then we will move to virtual hands raised for public comment. And we're going to have 2 minutes for public comment this evening. So again, these are public comments on non-agenda items. And the first one is Kathy Piscini from Pioneer High School. We're making sure the microphone's working, so everybody just please hold.
Is there a representative from the city who could assist from their IT team?
Hello? Oh, good. Okay, great. Okay. Well, just as I did during the negotiations last year, I am here to support my union. Once again, I find myself speaking to you to ask for a living wage. While my fellow CSEA members and I appreciate the last increase in pay of 15% to cover the 2020-21 and the 21-22 school years, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because we had been so underpaid for so many years that it didn't bring us up to where we should be to bring us out of poverty. So what is poverty? I could quote some statistics such as in order to live comfortably here, you need to have a household income of at least $9,100 a month. Sonoma County is constantly rated as one of the top places in the US to live, but that's only true if you have the income. It is estimated that 9.6% of the households are living in poverty, but that may not be completely accurate since there are different ways to define poverty, such as absolute poverty, relative poverty, situational poverty, and so forth. So I don't agree with that percentage. It is probably much higher. I could give you more statistics, but that doesn't accurately define it. So I go back to my question, what is poverty? You are poor if you can't feed your, I'm emotional, properly, and you and your children go to bed and wake up hungry. You are poor, no matter how careful you are with your money, and you don't have any resources in case of an emergency. You are poor if the soles on your shoes are wearing out and you can't buy new ones. You're poor if a family member has a birthday and you can't buy them a present. You are poor if you have to borrow money from your children. You are poor if you don't have sufficient money in the bank to fix your car when it breaks down.
Kathy, your time is
You are
up.
poor if you can't go to the ER on the weekend or at night in the event of an emergency because your health insurance won't cover all the costs.
I'm
and your
sorry to
portion-
interrupt, Kathy. Your time is up. Your 2-minute time limit is up. Thank
And
you.
your portion could be $1,000 to $2,000 just to walk in the door and get minimal care.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up, we have Jeannie Marie Bessassini. Sorry if I did not pronounce that properly.
I'm fine. I don't understand. No. I want to continue. I can't continue. Wait a minute.
Kathy, if there's extra time, if there's extra things that you'd like to submit via email, you could submit it that way as well.
Oh my God.
Greetings and salutations to the community and to the board. Thank you for bringing up the topic of Indigenous human sovereignty at the start of the meeting. My name is Jeanne-Marie Besançonnet. I'd like to express my gratitude for Executive Assistant Ms. Adina Flores. With the sweetest heart for humanity and especially the children, for her arduous investigative finance work. If more public servants who are sworn under oath to uphold our Constitution, California, and the United States of America would refuse to participate in fraud, oppression, liability-free injections, and a tyrannical digital social credit score system wishing to control every human being, we might save this city, county, state, nation, and humanity itself. Find your strength. Lots of love.
Thank you. Next up, we have Shelby Pryor.
My name is Shelby Pryor. I would like to acknowledge the fact that we had a fist bump from Ms. Dela Cruz, who wanted to talk and show her sovereignty here by recognizing the Pledge of Allegiance, which I helped to defend. I also would like to talk about the fact that her utter disregard for the ability to proceed and do her job should make her step down. I think that her not understanding leveraging minorities to do things that they don't want to do amongst themselves is not helping her community. She also has a bias. Her bias is for her people. Your people are the children that you represent sitting on this board. Your political theater of continuing to wear a mask, you don't realize people have eyes. The last Board of Supervisors meeting, I watched you put your mask on once you realized I knew who you were. Stepping outside of a building where you had a mask on just like you are fictitiously doing now. I continue to go ahead and see people being taken advantage of and misplaced in this community by people and their terrible agendas. I'm here to serve my community as a Black and a white person in this community. Latinos need somebody who's gonna not only support their agendas, because when you talk about BIPOC and indigenous people, Native Americans own slaves. Let's continue to let that sink in. We always get put last, and you have some agenda to raise money. You need to start digging deep inside yourselves and understand that selling out your own people is worse than what any other group could do to us. We continue to sit here and thrive and watch you go ahead and profit off the hard work of the minorities who work in those fields you have no knowledge of. You might listen to your grandma's stories, but those aren't yours. Some of us actually live this reality every day. Thank you for showing up, Mr. Medina. Continue spending our lovely money that you embezzled.
Okay, next up, we have Dan, and I don't have a last name, so could you please state your full name for the record? Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Dan Ferrando. I do not even live here, nor do I have any children in school anymore. But, you know, being on social media, I've listened to Dina's story, and she's got a heart. She has a love for kids, love for people, and our healthcare too, and what's going on with the vaccine. You know, there's Dr. Malone, who was part of the mRNA. There's Sherry Tenpenny, who was involved in the beginning with Dr. Fauci. There's Simone Gold, frontline nurse. Why aren't these people in the media anymore? Because they're shunned, because they're telling the truth. You know, everything we see in the news today is fake. It's all BS. And I think a lot of people are waking up to what's going on, and a lot of people are getting sick from this vaccine and all these boosters. And my hope is, because one day I'm going to have kids or grandchildren, is that they're not going to be forced and mandated to get a vaccine. A lot of my parents, older folks, are getting sick now, coming down with cancer and all kinds of issues. And that's one of the things you're going to see if you look and follow these other doctors who are being banned from media. It kills the white blood cells, all the white blood cells that defend off and fight infection and stuff. And you get another booster and it boosts your immune system even further down. And my hope is that, you know, we all have a right to what goes into our body. And I hope you guys understand that and follow our Constitution. Thank you.
Next up, we have Maria Posey.
Hi, I'm Maria Posey. What brought me here is Miss Adina Flores. I know many parents that are having problems with what's going on with their kids. They've been worried. And Adina has been the one who has stepped up and has raised her voice. What's concerning to me is that this district has somebody as amazing as her who's willing to speak up and is now not able to do her job. And nobody is talking about what she's being investigated for. That's not okay. You guys are supposed to be for the kids. If anyone should be under investigation, it should be the board members that are working for the county. Who's making money off this? And off whose back? Our kids? Off the parents who had to miss work to stay home with their kids because teachers that were too scared to be around them? Put someone like Adina in there. She'd have taken every single one of those kids. I have another friend who was a counselor for this district. She had to leave because she was harassed so much, speaking up on the mental illness or mental health of the kids. You guys didn't speak up. You don't care. So why are you even here? What's the point? Start doing your job. Stick up for the kids, stick up for the parents. You have somebody that's doing that. And what do? You investigate her. And you don't think that that's bullshit?
Okay, just a reminder, we want to keep the comments civil. Thank you. Next up, we have Kelly, and I don't have a last name, so if you could state your full name for the record.
Hi there, my name is Kelly McFarland. Good evening, board and superintendent. Superintendent Trunell has done a tremendous job promoting equity and equality within the district. However, it seems that certain members of the board have motives which are not in the best interest of our children. Director De La Cruz also holds the title of Equity Officer for the county. Why has the equity officer been leveraging white grower investments with Supervisor Gore based on how many Latinos they can force to be vaccinated? This has been confirmed in their text message thread through a records request. Why did President Sheffield fail to disclose on his Form 700 that his spouse has worked in the County of Sonoma Health Services Department for nearly 20 years and also holds the title of Population Health Manager at Southwest Community Health? He also forgot to disclose that he's the Government Affairs Manager for Sutter Health for the North Bay. Ms. Flores has continually proven that this entire pandemic is a farce, both through the illegitimate science and financials. She has helped to represent the entire community of parents, staff, and students who do not wish to take investigational products that have zero long-term studies. She's been on the receiving end of both racism and discrimination of her faith for the past year. This maltreatment has not only been consistent, but encouraged. Healdsburg Councilwoman Palacio has expressed very similar concerns. Why are you ignoring the voices of two of the most intelligent women of color in our community? Lies do not wish to be questioned. Thank you.
Next up, we have Linda Cade.
My name is Linda Cade. I live in Healdsburg, but I was a student in Santa Rosa, and so were my children. And I appreciate you all serving and doing the right things for our children, because they are the priority, not the teachers' unions who have way too much money flowing through them to push through their agendas of masking and vaxxing and testing. And everyone knows the testing is a farce. The masking is oppressive. You should wear a mask if you want to. Nobody should be mandated to wear a mask. Nobody should be mandated to be vaccinated. I appreciate Adina Flores. In Healdsburg, we have a woman named Ariel Kelly who happens to be the granddaughter of a Rothschilds. I'm from Healdsburg and now I'm running for city council because I'm wondering why would somebody at that high of a level, you know, the 1%ers, be on city council? Apparently the mass formation psychosis is in full effect, especially because of all these chairs. It's ridiculous. If you have COVID, don't come in here. Actually, if you have COVID, you probably just have a cold. This is disgusting. It needs to end. COVID is over. And thank you, Adina, for your investigative journalism so that we can all know the truth about what's happening, even though I knew because I heard about Agenda 21 back in 2006, and Obama happened to write about a pandemic in his book, The Audacity of Hope. They were planning for pandemics and they created one and now we're suffering from it. So it's over, people. Let's end it.
Okay, that's all the blue cards I have. So let's go to our virtual public comments.
If there are members of the public attending the meeting on Zoom and you would like to make a public comment on a non-agenda item, please raise your hand. There is a 2-minute time limit, which will be shared on the screen. If you could please watch the time. The first hand is Jamie. Jamie, can you state your full name for the record? Jamie, if you're there, can you please unmute and state your full name for the record?
Thank you for unmuting me. My name is Jamie Abrego. I've been doing a lot of research myself alongside Miss Adina Flores and for my own validity of everything that's been happening. And the only reason why everyone is following suit and jumping in line with the pandemic of COVID-19 is because you want the money. You want the money from all the grants. You want the money from all the funding and all of this stuff. Yet you still, as the schools, I was on several different meetings last school year, and many parents said, why don't we have tents for the kids to eat luncheon yet? Why don't we have all of these things? Why are you going to make them wear masks again when the kids cry because going to school because they can't breathe? OSHA has standards on wearing masks. And if you wear a mask for more than a couple hours, you increase the carbon dioxide levels in your brain. And therefore it causes different types of neurological disorders in children, mental health issues, breathing issues. There is several reasons why, other than the masks don't work, to have children not wear the masks. Just whenever you decide to approve all these grants and all these contracts that you have in your agenda, try to have them where it benefits the children and not influence their brains, or try to make them decide if they're a boy or a girl, because that's the parent's decision.
Thank you. Next comment is from L. Turner. If you can please state your full name for the record.
Hi, thank you. This is Lorraine Turner. I was a student in Santa Rosa schools, and I have 2 students now that are in high school. I've actually been calling not just this school district, but many others as I have other friends that are parents, and we are also very concerned about the overreach that has occurred and has not benefited the children. And I'm speaking about the ESSER plans and the return to school plans. And it took me 2 years to find out that even though the ESSER plans require parents and community input, and that the strategies should be evidence-based, even though we have had meetings with our superintendents and we have called the boards, it's just disturbing for me to find out that it was actually the teachers' unions' contracts for their safe environment that determined that children would wear masks. And I have not seen anything that provided that they had any kind of oversight that would check on the kids and monitor them. Not only that, but did you realize they're all being enrolled in an illegal research project? And what I mean by that is, this is an experiment. All of these devices, I've called on this before, by the way, I'm still being ignored. I've provided information about how all of the devices, and they are devices according to the FDA, look it up, masks, tests, and vaccines. None of them are approved except for emergency use. Emergency use requires informed consent. The families are not getting informed. They're getting propaganda, pressure, and coercion. The children are not giving consent. Their only option is to leave school if they don't follow the rules that the teachers' unions contracted. And from what I've heard, the unions are pressuring this district with lawsuits or complaints to say
Thank
that
you.
you guys are breaching your contract.
Thank
That's
you,
not
Ms.
how this
Turner.
should be formed. Think about the kids.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Next comment is from Julie. This is a non-agenda public comment, 2-minute limit. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Julie Lumen. So first of all, since looks like Anna Trunnell is not watching us, maybe she could take some notes. And I would like to know, why is there no Q&A forum? You're going to listen to us. Assume you just write us off and you go on with whatever you're doing. I want to know why there is no interactive forum. I want answers. Next, I would like to know why there is no information given to Ms. Adina Flores' layoff to her due to the layoff due to undefined investigation. It does not seem to me that that would be a reasonable thing for anybody to do. Where is human resources? Why is this happening? And she has the right to know. What is the investigation? What is the length of her, we'll call it layoff period? And if any of that is public, needs to be made public. Next is, I would like to know, why are you in a position in your minds that you are touching our children with mandates, fake rules, blaming some teachers union for behavior that you want us to do while our young ones are at school, while we're at meetings, while we're on the premises. You do not have the right to touch any of us in terms of our health. Neither adults, any of us, or our young people, any of them. They are ours. They are not yours. Stop touching.
Thank you, Julie. Next up is Micah Carlin Goldberg.
Good evening. My name is Micah Carlin Goldberg. I'm a teacher at Steel Lane Elementary. I was calling in order to speak to the board about staffing. I found out today our numbers for Steel Lane for our upper grades are 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. We have a combo class with 32 children in it. We have a 5th grade and a 6th grade straight class with 33 in them, and two 4th grades with 28 and 29 in them. This is because we had one teacher reduction over the last 2 years. Had we that one teacher, we would have a class size of between 22 and 26. Now, that may not seem like a huge deal, that 4 children per classroom, but I can tell you for a fact, having had both the huge class and the smaller class, it makes the world of difference for what I can do with my students. Having 26 instead of 32 or 33 students is a huge, huge advantage for the students and their learning. And I'm concerned that our district is going at bare bones staffing levels where they're cramming every single kid we can into a classroom instead of hiring enough teachers to keep class sizes low and remove combination classes, which are literally the worst thing for children. That was what I called for. Having listened to several of the comments, I'd like to put a couple of facts out there. Masks have not been mandated in our schools since the spring, when the rules changed from the CDC and CDPH. So I'm not sure where they're talking about kids were not allowed to take their masks off. The kids have been allowed to not wear masks in the classrooms since the spring, mid-spring sometime. I don't remember the exact date. So I'm not sure where they're getting their information from, but that at least is completely false. I really hope the school board will continue to put the best interests of all students, staff, and community at the heart of all their decisions. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jamama. If you could please state your full name for the record.
Hi, my name is Kelly Larkins. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm calling regards because of these forced mandated vaccinations and what we've learned over the course of the past couple years. We've only learned because we had to sue Pfizer for the documents that they wanted to conceal and hide for 75 years. Within those documents, we found severe adverse events, 9 pages with over 1,200 adverse reactions reported. Within those, it describes within 3 months' time from December of 2020 to February of 21, where there was 1,209 serious cardiac events, which occurred up until the 21 days of after vaccination, but the median is less than 24 hours. It was all derived from both theirs and directly from Pfizer. It is confirmed that also most of the adverse events occurred within the 24 hours of vaccinations, but we all know all people who are unvaccinated within the 14 days of the shot, they'll get reported on the 14th day. The rule hides a vast increase in mortality amongst the vaccinated. So I don't understand why we're still hiding the adverse reactions and the outcomes by the CDC's handling and also ICD-10 coding. In regards to Adina Flores, I think it's really uncalled for her to be taken out of work on leave when she is merely finding all these county documents and bringing them forward. For them to be called conspiracy theories.
Kelly, thank you. Your time is up.
Gaslighting the people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Christina Little.
Hi, my name is Christina Little. I am a single mom, and I'm here speaking in support of Miss Adina Flores and the incredible investigative work she's been doing. Why won't any of our elected officials or public nonprofits answer the questions this young woman has? Second, what happened to free speech? Third, why has Adina been put on administrative leave? Is it for speaking her beliefs? I want to know the answers to these questions. I'm not going to accuse anyone of anything yet, but it is time for all of Adina's questions to be answered. Maybe the answers to these questions will ease the minds of some parents and prove to us you are actually looking out for the best interest of our children. My paperwork on my vaccine actually says the COVID-19 vaccine is an unapproved vaccine that may prevent COVID-19. There is no FDA-approved vaccine to prevent COVID-19. I am strongly opposed to the schools mandating any sort of vaccines for our children. I'm a healthcare worker. I did get the first one. I have not gotten any since. I've been to London. I've been to the Dominican. I have not gotten COVID. I have had the flu shot, and you know, COVID is a coronavirus, and the flu is also a coronavirus. So maybe there's some correlation. I don't know. All I know is I haven't gotten COVID. You know, you guys have been loosening the terminology of words. Emergency approved authorization is not the same thing as FDA approved. But the loosening of these terms is that so that when you translate them in another language and you do the literal translation.
Thank you,
can
Ms.
get away
Little.
with-
Your time is up. Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Jay Fowler. If you could please state your full name for the record.
Hi, my name is Jamie Fowler, and I'm a parent, and I'm calling in support of Adina Flores. She has done nothing but amazing investigative work, and she's brought a lot of information to the public's eye. And I think that's why she has so many supporters, because us people in Sonoma County are sick of being lied to. Anybody who has kids in school saw them go through what they went through being forced to wear a mask. And realistically, there's more and more evidence coming out that shows that there's so many lies and so much corruption behind a lot of this coronavirus stuff. And I really see that the agenda continues to be pushed. Somebody like Adina, who's uncovering information, just randomly loses her job and she doesn't get any reasoning behind that. There's no reason for that. And honestly, I hope that she brings an amazing lawsuit against you guys, because she deserves to know. And I do agree with what the last speaker said. If you guys give her an answer, maybe it will give us parents answers too, and know that you really do have the best interests at heart for our kids, because it doesn't seem like it when we understand that there's grievances being brought up by our teachers unions about the fact that you're not enforcing masks. If somebody wants to wear a mask, they can wear a mask. Don't force my child to do it. And I look forward to continuing on listening to what Adina has to say, because she's more forthright and transparent than most of our board of supervisors. And for as far as I'm concerned, a lot of you board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. Our next speaker is Deanna Oliveras.
Hi, Superintendent and Board. You haven't heard from me in a few months because I needed an emotional break from these meetings, like we all do sometimes, but I'm back. And what I wanted to say is I hope that you finally realize after 2 years, after 2 years of listening to the same people call in about the same things, whether they're community members, employees, or parents, that the Santa Rosa City School Board, for the past probably 4 years at least, it's an echo chamber. You're in an echo chamber, and I don't think you're looking at the big picture of how people feel and how other people in the community members may not agree with you. And you all agree on the same thing. You all vote the same way. You almost all are cookie cutter. And it's kind of alarming because our community and our schools are not that way, right? We're really diverse. And so what I hope now is after, I guess it's advice that, you know, there's a volcano that's going to erupt. I mean, went from parents to community members to now district employees. And this all could have been avoided. And I've said this many times, if you put yourself in the other person's shoes, if you're transparent, not just bare minimum transparent to not break the law, but very, very transparent. Because when you're not transparent, it looks dishonest and it looks like you're hiding something, even though you may not be. And so moving forward, I wish every one of you board members to pick a subject, to pick a person that has called time after time and spoke up, and just try to connect with them and listen to where they're coming from, because you may think that everyone that spoke so far is batshit crazy or conspiracy theorists, but there are some place we could find a common ground. And I hope that you all realize that we're all not all like you.
Thank you, Ms. Oliveros. Our last speaker is listed as Fat Boys. If you could please state your full name for the record.
Hello, my name is Jessica Tillis. I am just wanting to say thank you to Adina for just the different research that she's done, and for Skylar Palacio standing up for medical freedom in Healdsburg. And my daughter had a vaccine injury when she was a baby, and I watched her, actually my son and I both watched her have a seizure. And so I have had to have them do homeschool, because last year the school took the license away from the doctor that we had to make a huge report for in order to get a vaccine waiver. And so my son, he's an athlete and he really wants to go to school, and it's really difficult because he's trying to do homeschool and he's just really stressed out and trying to do, I'm not a teacher, but I'm doing the best that I can. And I wish my kids could go back to school, but he also gets hives from his vaccine injury. And so it's just really difficult to try and work with the school when you have different situations that don't all fall under the same category as, like, you know, just mass vaccinating the population. There's a lot of people who are a lot different, and they can't just go out and receive these different chemicals and stuff and be safe by it. So I would appreciate it if we could just go to school and learn, and if we're sick, go home, you know, just use common sense. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Tillis. I believe that's the end of our public comment on non-agenda items.
Okay, we are moving on. Thank you. Can you please exit? It is not time to talk. You can talk at a different time on an agenda item. Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to D1. Do we have a report from our CSEA Santa Rosa 75?
There's no report tonight from CSEA 75.
Okay. Do we have a report from our SRTA? Yes, great. Thank you.
Good evening.
Where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
Hear me?
I think you can lower
I can
those.
barely
It's
see
really
you.
hard to see people behind that podium. Can we lower it a little bit? I can see you on the screen right here, but there we go. Okay, great. Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Trinnell and Vice President McCormick. I'm Catherine Howell, the President of Santa Rosa Teachers Association, representing about 850 teachers in Santa Rosa. The teachers are gearing up for the new school year. And we wanted to say thank you for first limiting the amount of summer email that has been coming to members and educators that don't need to check email during the summer. So we're appreciative that a lot of that type of communication has calmed down and disappeared. And we're also thanking you for honoring the paid time that we negotiated last year for our mandated trainings, mandated reporter, and a few others that we need to take every year, which is going to be offered the first few days of teacher time. So that's much appreciated. As for tonight's agenda, we're very interested in the solar power project. And I will bring up that in the last year, it was proven that we definitely need covered outdoor space for eating and meetings, and wondering if that had been considered rather than just covered parking for those solar panels, especially at a few of our school sites that don't actually have parking lots, as a way to give them some solar panels on their land, on their property. We're looking forward to hearing your discussion around the bond measures. SRTA is ready to stand in support of that, but we do need transparent and inclusive process for how that money is going to be spent before we're going to be ready to jump on board and fully support that. We know that our facilities need work. We know that our district needs money to perform that work. But we also have spent the last few years watching the last bond measure money being spent without input from us or the community. And there's definitely educators in the district that will oppose any bond measures without some sort of collaborative spending process. And finally, I want to say welcome to all the new educators that have been hired by Santa Rosa City Schools. We are extremely happy that those that served in the military are getting 2 years of credit. We're also very happy that those that served in the Peace Corps are getting 2 years of credit on their initial salary placement. But because of the board policy that was initiated in September 2019, anyone that was hired before that is still not receiving any credit for that service in the military, any sort of industrial experience in CTE. New hires get it. Anyone hired before 2019 does not. So I'm asking that this board please look at that policy and please change it and update it so that we have an equity, amongst our educators in this district in terms of their initial salary placement. And that's my report this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Howell. Up next, we have D3, our superintendent report.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President McCormick, members of the board, community members in person and online. Please excuse my remoteness, and thank you for your time this evening. I just want to be brief tonight and just say welcome back as we begin to move towards the beginning of the school year. We hope that the summer is going well for everyone. We are working hard to prepare for the start of school. We realize that COVID is still a present issue for us. And so we will be sharing more information with our community by the August 10 board meeting to ensure that we have the most up-to-date guidance before the start of school. What you can expect is continued COVID safety practices, including the availability of masks, isolation tents, tents for outdoor eating, availability of antigen test kits, and cleaning protocols as usual. In addition, masking will continue to be strongly recommended in order to minimize exposure and case rates. We will discuss additional testing options later in the board meeting, and we will begin sending out information to our families soon in preparation for the start of school. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Vice President McCormick.
Thank you. I do not have a report this evening, nor am I the president. So, but are there any other board member reports at this time? Moving on to D5. Oh, we're going to start with Trustee Fong. Well, let's start with you. Can you please reintroduce yourself to the world?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Julie Bui. I'm a student at Pioneer High School. I'll be a senior this year.
And for my report, I just wanted to mention how I was able to go to the CSBA Leadership Institute this past weekend. It was an incredible opportunity. It made me realize how I was even more passionate about our school system and how inspired I am to contribute in any way I can to our district and all the schools in our district. In addition, some of my takeaways were how I was being able to meet a bunch of other students and other adults in the different districts with the same intentions of caring for the students and our public education. And I'm also happy that I was able to familiarize myself even more with the school board system as a whole. And lastly, being able to attend this event, it made me even more excited for the upcoming school year, which is happening in less than 2 weeks. So I'm excited for that. Thank you.
Thank you for representing us there, and welcome. Thank you for doing the work. We're really excited to have you, Julie. Okay. Director Fong.
I'd like to recognize Dr. Nicole Tafoya and Principal Valerie Jordan at Ridgeway High School. They had their summer graduation and they graduated 30 students who worked very hard over the summer to get their credits to earn their high school diploma. And when you're a student who is enrolled in Ridgeway and you're ending up in summer, you know that there are challenges that they have taken care of, they've persevered, they were resilient, and their families and friends were so proud of them. The noise level there was incredible. So we were very proud of them.
Thank you. Any other reports? No? Okay. Do we have a CSBA report this evening?
No report.
Okay. We are moving into our E items. So we are going to start with E1, which is an action item, resolution number 20222312 of the Board of Santa Rosa Schools approving ratification of, sorry, I just clicked on it. It's refreshing, of the 2019 MOU with City of Santa Rosa relating to the sale of the Fur Ridge site, and supplemental agreement with the City of Santa Rosa relating to use of proceeds from the sale of the Fur Ridge site, and third amendment to purchase and sale agreement with Christopherson Builders. And so with that, I think I'm turning it over to Superintendent Trunell.
Thank you, Vice President McCormick, and welcome to Jim Traber tonight, who will be assisting us with this item. We bring forward information to the board for potential approval. Yes, on resolution number 2022-23-12 regarding the Fur Ridge site. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Traber.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So through this resolution, the board would approve essentially 3 different agreements. The first is simply ratifying the 2019 MOU that was done then and allowing the parties to record that in the county clerk's office. That's something that the city wanted to do. I don't see a reason not to do that. The second agreement is a supplemental agreement with the city, which essentially is along the same lines as the 2019 MOU, but the 2019 MOU is basically going to be released through the close of escrow. And so this supplemental agreement basically will recognize the school district has a continuing obligation to use the proceeds from the sale for developing workforce housing. There's also a quarterly reporting obligation there and some prior notice to be given to the city so they can confirm essentially that the district's use is going to be consistent with the intent of the 2019 MOU to provide meaningful benefit to a reasonable number of employees. The third agreement that would be approved is this amendment to the purchase agreement with Christopherson Builders. The original purchase price that Christopherson offered was based on an assumption that certain land use regulations in the city had not been enforced in a while, and he assumed that he could continue with that. But recently, those regulations are back in place. And so his original assumption was he could develop 30 units. As he got further into due diligence, he determined that he could not do that. And right now, and prior to close of escrow, it's not going to be clear how many market rate units he can build. He's confident that he can get 11 units, but there's going to be some uncertainty until
a map is approved by the city. So basically, what the third amendment would do is have him pay 1.21 million at closing, which is $110,000 per lot, with $110,000 for each lot that is approved by the city, and a subsequent payment after that. So that's the essence of this resolution, is approving those three different agreements.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have any questions from the board on this? No? Should we go to public comment and then go to discussion? Okay, so I don't have any cards, so can we ask if there's any public comment virtually?
Yes, if you are attending the meeting on Zoom and you would like to make a public comment on E1, which is a resolution approving the ratification of the MOU with City of Santa Rosa relating to the sale of Fir Ridge, please raise your virtual hand at this time. Our first speaker is Deanna Oliveras.
Hi, I just wanted to, sorry, I'm getting over being sick. Reiterate what I said earlier about transparency. For most parents and community members, especially with two parents or one parent working household, we barely have enough time to come to a meeting. So to listen to what the man just said about this for a Ridge property, and to even read on the agenda what it's about, and it dates back to 2019. This is like a foreign language to us. So again, transparency. So what I think it is you guys are trying to build affordable housings for teachers and staff and district employees, but that's not being said. Even if you don't know what you're going to do yet, but that was initially the thought. It's probably not going to come out when it's time for you board members to discuss it, because then it's going to, get some backlash. And again, if you guys are constantly, if you're transparent, you won't keep getting backlash from parents, whether it's the Adina situation or vaccines or masking or Fir Ridge. If you are transparent beyond legality, but morally, just be transparent with us and let us know what's going on. I think you'll get a lot less frustration from community members and parents, because I think that's what the board is missing. And I know it takes a lot of time and energy to be extra transparent, and you guys probably barely have enough time to be board members because you all have careers and stuff. But I think it's vital to stop dividing us all and to pull us together a little bit, to be as transparent as you can and ask us for our thoughts on some things more than you do now. Surveys, town halls, Q&A sessions, etc.
Thank you, Ms. Oliveras. I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so I bring it back to the board for discussion.
Well, it's more like a question here. So I was under the impression that all the proceeds of the sale of this was going to go into a fund for a down payment sort of assistance, but it sounds like we're also considering the proceeds to go to possible construction of district housing. Where do you go? Could you talk a little bit about that? Are they mutually exclusive? And how do we know when we can do one versus the other?
So I can take that. So we haven't changed anything really from where we were in 2019, which is that the board has both options available to it. One would be like a down payment assistance program, and the other would be actually financing the construction or assisting with financing construction, maybe of an ongoing project, and then reserving a certain number of units for our employees. Both options are still available. And I think that at some point in 2019, there was a discussion about it, and there was a preference toward doing the down payment, assistance program. To my knowledge, we're not locked into doing either of those right now. At this point, we're, still in the process of trying to sell and then figuring out, I think, from there what the best use of the funds would be.
Okay, it just seems like, I mean, the first offer that we received, and granted, there were other mitigating circumstances as to why the value changed. That 1.2 or 1.2 million is not that much money to build housing. So, but it sounds like we'll discuss that once the sale goes through, right? It'll come back to us, and then we'll make the decision as to how to deal with that, with those funds.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Medina.
Thank you. So just to add, this property has been with us for a really long time, given to us from the city, and we had to get special permission from the city to now be able to sell it because we haven't been able to construct. It's been very cost prohibitive there where it's at. And clearly there's still continues to be issues, but my understanding is that once we sell it and we know what kind of money we have to work with, then, I think in 2019, we developed an ad hoc committee of board members to then work on what program would be developed. And part of that, I imagine once we actually sell it and we know what we're working with, we will revisit that ad hoc committee and then work on how we collaborate with staff or unions to develop a program, because ultimately it's a benefit for the district. And I think the goal is to help our staff have housing in some way or get housing assistance. So I think that part, we're unclear whether it's building housing or housing assistance of some form. That's still to be developed. And I think once all the sale goes through and everything, and we know what we're working with, then we can work at better developing that. And I hope that when we do that, we do it collaboratively with everybody, because it's what we need. But we need to get through this process that seems to have been taking years and years, unfortunately. But I'm supportive of going through with the sale. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
Move to approve resolution 2022-2312, ratification of the 2019 MOU with City of Santa Rosa relating to the sale of Fur Ridge site.
Second.
So we have a motion from Director Fong and a second from Director Flores. Comment? Discussion? Okay.
I just will add that I'm in agreement with Director Medina. We've been looking at this for a very long time since I've been on the board, and we have done due diligence the entire way. And I think to Ms. Oliver's comment in terms of transparency, it's kind of like when you live with something for so long, you forget how to bring people back on board. So this was a gift from developer. This is a developer, when they developed up in Fountain Grove, they were supposed to set aside so many acres for a school, 6 acres. So as we looked at building a school, there wasn't the need for the school there, and it was cost prohibitive, and transportation would have been also prohibitive to kids to get to that school. Then we tried to sell it, wasn't happening. There's fires. Tried to sell it, still wasn't happening. And we did have to get permission from the city of Santa Rosa. So we finally did, and then the market tanked, and here we are now with contingencies to help us with as many lots as we can possibly, money we can get from it, from the Christopherson builders who are going to purchase it. And they have to make it cost efficient for themselves. And as Director Medina pointed out, it reminded us that we still are going to be deciding how we use those funds. Always to provide housing, down payments or housing. But again, here's another little rant from me, is like, when people say subsidized teacher housing, that includes other school employees. I mean, the audacity of that is, why can't we, the state of California, pay our teachers so we don't need subsidizing? Why do we need to subsidize our educators so they can live in their communities? So that's a whole other question. But anyway, let's vote.
All right, with that, let's call for the vote.
Director Bowie, Director Fong. Aye. Director Flores.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. Okay. E1 passes. Moving on to E2, which is also an action item that we're going to start with a public hearing. So I am going to open public hearing on resolution number 2022-2311, approving certain findings pursuant to government, I can't even read, I got the wrong glasses on. Government Code Section 421712, and authorizing district staff to execute a power purchase agreement and related easement with Ridgeway Avenue DG Solar LLC for the design, construction, and installation of solar facilities and related purchase of energy. So the public hearing is now open. So we don't have any cards here in the house, so let's call for it virtually.
If there are members of the public who would like to comment on item C2 and you're attending the meeting by Zoom, please raise your virtual hand at this time. Our first speaker is Amy Ziegler.
Good evening, board. So this is my first time even knowing about Santa Rosa City Schools. And so I was cruising through the agenda and I did notice this item, and I'm wondering if any of you are aware that solar is just not as efficient as any of us would be led to believe, that there are a lot of particulates in the air that are making it so that you don't get the absorption and the uptake of solar, let's say as in 20 years ago. So exactly, has anyone gone over any of this as far as reports that you've gotten? I guess you can't really answer that, but that's one of my concerns. And my other concern about that is electricity wise, that's part of the problem with most green energy right now, is that you know, it's just going to pull more power from the grid. It might help a little bit, but what is the cost effectiveness of it really with, you know, the city's dollars is my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ziegler. Our next speaker is Margaret Brown. Good evening. I just wanted to say I'm really excited about the idea of the district getting solar. I think that's very smart and just really forward thinking. I did want to reiterate what Catherine Howell said about doing covered eating areas. Ridgeway has a beautiful covered eating area. If we could get more of those at different schools, that would be amazing. Thank you. Thank you. There are no other hands raised.
Okay, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. So this is E2 is an action item. So we are going to have a presentation from Superintendent Trunell and Director Oden.
Thank you. And with that, I will hand it straight over to Mr. Oden.
Thank you, Superintendent Trunell and members of the board. I
don't think your mic's on. A little green light.
Yeah.
Just maybe bring it in closer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Better? Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Trunell, members of the board. I'm here to help discuss the resolution authorizing district staff to execute a power purchase agreement related to the easement with Ridgeway Avenue DG Solar LLC for the design, construction, and installation of solar facilities and related purchase of energy. I'd like to share my screen and show a little bit of the presentation we did for a discussion item back in May
to kind of go over some of the sites and kind of some of the benefits of what we're proposing, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Traber to discuss the actual agreement. Let's see if I put that. Grand, I may need your help with this one. Yeah. Share screen.
Show me where it's open first.
Oh, it's right here.
Okay, go back to your Zoom.
There you go.
Back to the PowerPoint. Share.
This is open system.
No. Yeah. Zoom, go ahead. Zoom's not allowed. Good. Yeah. Leave and come back. He's got to leave and come back. He'll be back in a second.
For those of you online, we're just bear with us. We are trying to pull up presentation so everyone can see it.
Oh, I would also be happy to share my screen for Eric, if that helps.
That's the whole bit. Go ahead. Superintendent Trinnell, would you go ahead and share your screen? Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. New laptop from work. So again, to reiterate, sorry, we're discussing the resolution to authorize district staff to execute a PPA and related easements. This slideshow is mostly from May, some slight revisions, but the project summary, it's the opportunity to install 4.5 megawatts of solar across our schools, 20 of them to be precise. Most of them are going to be carport type structures, whether they're either in parking lots or over recreational fields or play structures. We did work with site staff to design and lay out kind of where these were going to go. It took quite some time to get that done. The funding, this is a power purchase agreement, so it requires no capital from the district, as well as no maintenance or operation costs throughout the life of the system. The savings we were looking at over 30 years are, somewhere in the neighborhood of over $30 million.
Some of the benefits of the project, shade protection, of course, for people in vehicles, no capital, reduced electricity bills, no maintenance, and local power generation. Here we're going to go through some of the slides of the 20 slides of the schools and where the arrays are going to be located. Again, we work closely with staff, a lot of feedback to get to these points. At Biela, most of them these are parking lot structure, 26 spaces. Brook Hill, this one's over play structure and grass to help with shading. Comstock, this is between the city field and our school and some parking spaces, 60 of them. CCLA, it's in the large parking lot. It provided the best solar. The district office Ridgeway in the back behind Ridgeway Field and behind the kitchen warehouse, over 42 parking spaces. Elsion High School in the main parking lot for both staff and students. It covers 84 spots. Helen Lehman is in the field and blacktop area to help with shading for recreational time. Hidden Valley Elementary, same thing over the recreational area and blacktop. Monroe, again, same thing, elementary school over the grass area to provide some shade. Lewis Opportunity School, that one sits in the asphalt, which will provide shade as well for lunch or anything for preschoolers in that area. Maria Creo High School, this is in the main staff and student parking lots, taking up 98 parking spaces. Montgomery High School, this is a larger system, taking up 162 spots in the both staff and student lots. Pioneer High School, same thing, another big, large one out in the big parking lot, covering 169 spaces. Ringgold Valley Middle School, this one's at the back of the tennis courts, kind of between the track, providing some shade over there. Arch Charter School, this is the only rooftop system we have listed. It's on the 2-story new building with the metal roof. So we feel comfortable with that being a rooftop system. Santa Rosa High School is the main parking lot for students and staff, 154 spaces. Santa Rosa Middle School, again, more recreational coverage on the field along 5th Street. Herbert Slater Middle School up in the main parking lot, covering up pretty much most of it, 58 spaces. And Steel Lane Elementary School, again, another recreational coverage by the play structure and recreational lawn area. And then lastly, there are 3 sites that are not included for some reasons, but Luther, Burbank, and Proctor Terrace were kind of the same problems. They have limited physical space, so the panel locations just result in too high of a price for the district to pay. And the French American Charter, of course, as you may be familiar, is located on a fault line, and any construction there triggers a lot of extra work. So it's not really financially viable at this time. Thank you, Superintendent Trudeau, for sharing. I will turn it over to Mr. Jim Traber to speak more to the PPA itself.
Thank you, Mr. Oden. So basically what you have is a 25-year deal where the solar company is going to come in and stand in the shoes of PG&E and sell you power at a reduced rate. They're going to own the environmental incentives that you would own if you own the system. That's part of the way that they're able to essentially pay down the debt service on the project and make it profitable for themselves. The solar company is going to have an obligation basically to have all of the permitting and approvals done by September of 2024. They're planning to have some of these projects done by summer of 23. But ultimately, by December 31st of 2024, they should have everything done and be selling you power at a reduced rate. And the cost savings go up over time. So if you look in the chart that accompanies your board item, basically year one, you start saving $145,000, and that number continually goes up over time, basically because PG&E rates and other local utility rates are going to continue to go up over time, whereas your PPA rate is going to be pegged at a much reduced inflation rate. Over the course of your deal, over the 25 years, the projection is that you would save $19 million, which is, without you having to put up any initial capital investment. And these sites are going to be coordinated in terms of scheduling with district staff, and the design of them is, of course, going to be coordinated with district staff. It already has been. There will be final district review process that takes place. There will be a couple opportunities to buy the solar systems. Basically, every 5 years, you have an opportunity to buy them out. Typically, most don't do that until you get pretty darn close to the end because the cost is kind of prohibitive, but you do have that option available in there. If the solar company's not able to, fails to provide the power by December 31st of 24, and it's their fault, meaning it's not some force majeure reason, then they will start owing you money for the difference between what you would have saved had they got it done and what you will have to pay if you're still relying on traditional utilities. So with that, I will open it up if anyone has any questions.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for questions. Director Flores.
So I have a couple of questions, actually. Whatever happened to Cicerco Energy Systems? I mean, I thought we were doing this with them, and I don't see them anywhere on the purchase agreement.
And if we could please move over, I'm sorry, Director Flores, if we can move over our guests from Cicerco to the panel. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So, and then what is their role in this project? And then while we wait for this person to come along, could you explain a little bit more what the reduced inflation rate means? Is it a locked sort of rate, or does it fluctuate with, I don't know, the consumer price index or something like that?
No, it's a locked rate. Eric, I'm sorry, is it 1% or 1.5%? It's a locked rate at 1 or 1.5%.
It's at 1%. So locked, yes, fixed rate. So it doesn't fluctuate with inflation. Okay, no. Thank you. I mean, that's what James had said earlier. Thank you.
I see we have the Cicerco team here as well. And just to answer your question, so Cicerco will be acting as a contractor to actually get the work done under the umbrella of Jua Capital or Ridgeway. Ridgeway is handling the financing aspect of it and will actually hold title to the things, but Cicerco is the one that I think will act as the contractor. And just welcome to our Cicerco guests. Thank you for being here this evening.
Are you finished?
No, I'm still waiting for the
Okay.
person from Cicerco to show up. Because I mean, I'm reading what we have on May of 25th of 2020. It says that Cicerco Systems will fully develop the project. So I just, I was waiting to hear from them too tonight, but apparently they're not here.
Yeah, Scott.
They're
Scott's
online.
here.
He's
Scott,
online.
do you want to take this?
Sure. Thank you, Board Member Flores, for your question. Sorry for the confusion here. Cicerco Energy Solutions very much be involved in the project. In this case, Jua Capital, forming the LLC of Ridgeway Solar DC, will be the owner and will be the provider of the electricity to the district. So they are the third-party financier owner of the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Medina.
Thank you. Following up on Director Flores' question on I think it was a 1% inflation. Is that consistent, or if energy prices go down, do we see a decrease as well, or do we still see it increasing?
So it would be consistent. I don't know, Scott, if you want to speak to that. I mean, so I think Scott can probably speak to historical inflation for energy rates probably better than I can. So.
Sure. Thank you, Board Member Medina. So in the recent rearview mirror, PG&E's rates have increased in an average of just over 3% per year. They have filed with the CPUC in advance of some upcoming rate increases, showing about 6% rate increases for at least the next 2 to 3 years. So the model was modeled with PG&E's rates going up by 6% for the next 2 years, and then 3% every year thereafter. The PPA that is up for approval by the board tonight has a 1% annual escalator. So you can see that the annual escalator offered in the power purchase agreement has a much lower rate of annual escalation relative to the historical average of PG&E.
So I guess my question would be, I think we were told the overall savings is about 30 million, but let's say if we were to construct and develop this project and we were creating the energy ourselves, in the longer term, the energy savings would be much greater. We would just have that upfront capital cost up ahead. Is that correct? And also, after the 25 years, if let's say we chose not to buy it, what would happen?
So I'll address the first question, if I may, and then Avinash Tiwari from Jua Capital is here, and he can address the question at the end of the term. The power purchase agreement provides a number of benefits to the district. One is, as the district does not realize any benefits because it doesn't pay taxes, a private investor is allowed the benefit of monetizing the federal investment tax credit, which is currently 26%. They also get the benefit of realizing the accelerated depreciation of the asset, which improves the return of their investment. There are options in the power purchase agreement that allow the district to purchase the array at different off-ramps. And Mr. Traber had articulated that those are in the agreement. I think they're typically every 5 to 6 years. There's the option for the district to purchase the array, and thereby you're making a capital infusion, but all of the offset non-purchased electricity, those savings would drop to your bottom line and your operating expense. So I guess that the PPA provides you get a lower levelized cost of energy because a private investor is allowed to monetize the ITC and the depreciation. And the district does get in the future the opportunity to own the outright asset and experience the benefits. And then I'll allow Avinash to articulate what the options are for the end of the 25-year term.
Yeah, so this is Avinash Tiwari, and there are really 3 options to the district at the end of the term, 25-year initial term. One, the district can ask us to remove the systems at our cost. So it's kind of, restore the site, remove all the solar panels and structures. So that's 1. 2, district can ask us to extend the PPA, power purchase agreement, for 5 more years at a mutually negotiated price. So district can fully sort of independently decide if they want to, or district wants to sort of extend the PPA again or not. And the third option is, which is always there, is at the end of the term is like negotiate a price and we can just kind of sell the system and you will own the system after that. And just so you know, that at that point in time, we are kind of we have kind of recovered. Well, we would have recovered. The expectation is that we would have recovered a reasonable return on our investment. And so we'll be much more motivated to sell it to the district because it is much more valuable. So these systems and parking structures and shade structures are much more valuable to the district versus us.
And then just to follow up, a rough estimate as to like if the district were to then purchase, like around how much would that cost? I know you can't estimate the future cost, but just an idea of like, we're talking about like 1 million or 50 million, or I don't know what that cost might be. And also, what is the life expectancy of like these solar panel systems, and what condition would we expect them to be in after like 25 years?
So I'll probably answer the second question first. The solar panels do come with 25-year warranty. So we will maintain and make sure that all these panels are working well when the year 25 comes. Solar panels, generally speaking, do not sort of stop working after 25 years. We use 35 to 40 years useful life for these panels. So they are going to be pretty functional. I would not say fully efficient 100%, but probably like 80% or so efficient even in year 25. So there is substantial value there, especially for the district, because district will still use electricity from solar projects or from the utility, PG&E. In terms of answer to your first question, for tax reasons, we are kind of prohibited or say like a number. It's going to be fair market value in terms of the purchase price. All I can say is that it's much more expensive for us to remove the system at that point in time versus sell it to the district. So we will be motivated to sell it for a fairly reasonable nominal price.
Thank you.
Director Fong.
Thank you to everyone who's here. Director Oden, Jim Traber, thank you. Dr. Oden, first of all, this is great. Saving a bunch of money like that, fantastic. Using solar, fantastic. So yes, it's gonna be yes, but just some clarifying things. Can you think of anything that would obligate Santa Rosa City Schools in terms of cost over the next 30 years with these solar arrays?
No, that's what's, from a maintenance perspective, that's kind of what's nice about this agreement is that O&M is outside of our purview. It's covered by them. So from a district perspective, we don't have to deal with the solar panels at all.
Okay, you would know. Do a happy dance
Yes.
right now? Happy dance.
Can I just add though? May I just add a comment? And Eric, if you could just speak to this. If for some reason damage is done to the equipment by the district in some way, we then are liable for supporting that piece. Can you explain a little bit more about that, Eric?
Yeah, and I bet actually Scott or Gabe can speak to it a little bit better. But yes, if we cause damage to an array, we are financially responsible for the energy loss and at that point until it gets repaired. So Scott, do you want to jump in on that?
I want to hand that off to Avinash in terms of the responsibility in the event of damage caused by the district. But before I do, I would just put the context that, you know, these solar arrays are an asset owned by that third party. So if there is damage caused to them, you know, any party causing damage would be liable for that. So I'll let Avinash fill in the details from there.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that, but Jim can also answer that. This is a contractual provision we have. It's like any other thing. If we have something, well, we have an asset which is fairly expensive at school location, and if the district or the school, and we're not saying that anybody's going to damage these things on purpose, but if there is a damage, we will expect to be compensated for that damage.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, so the solar providers kind of, they have a loan that they're using and they have debt service to pay on the loan. and they're going to use the revenue stream from the district based on the energy provided. So if, for example, the district went out and destroyed or partially destroyed one of the systems, it would reduce the amount of energy produced and thus, reduce the amount that you would have to pay, which would obviously, it would damage their ability to pay the debt service on their system. So there's a contractual mechanism there. If we were to damage it, we would have to, compensate them, make them whole for that. There's also, there's some other things where you could potentially wind up paying more money, such as if, if you need to take the system offline for a prolonged period of time or something like that, because again, they're counting on the revenue coming from the district to pay for the systems. So if you were to, for example, take the systems offline for more than 40 hours a year or something like that, there's a mechanism in there where you would have to make a true up payment to them. There's also a mechanism in there whereby you guys would cooperate to reduce any amount of reduced energy production by the system. If you had to move it around, you'd take it off in pieces rather than just pulling it all off at once.
Two more things. Kind of guarantee that we are going to get the most efficient panels possible.
Jim, that's in there. Yeah, can you speak to that?
Well, I think, so there's an energy production guarantee, and that's, they're guaranteeing they're going to produce a certain amount of kilowatt hours. As far as the most efficient equipment, I don't know that I can really speak to that. That's probably beyond my purview. I think the amount of, so the equipment used and its efficiency and all of those things probably play into the project cost, which then drive the per kilowatt hour price that you end up paying on the back end.
So I'm going to make this comment. 10 or 12 years ago, Montgomery High School, we worked with a solar company to try to put solar panels on the parking lot. And the board at that point said no. I wasn't sure their reason, but no. But as I was deciding what to do as principal, I was fearful that these panels weren't safe, or they'd be subject to graffiti, or they'd be subject to kids climbing all over them. But I don't see that happening at other places or other schools at all. So I think kids will take care of it. Anyway, finally, my last thing is, can we possibly find ways for our students to be part of this whole process as interns, or study with them, or have presentations from engineers, or be part of the building process, and involved our kids who are in math and science and anything, actually, history, English, STEM, because these are their schools. We're owning it, they're owning it. Not in an economic sense, but this is our community, this is our climate, this is what we do together. So I would love, Superintendent Trinnell, if we figured out a way to open it up to our students, and that they get to be a part of this somehow, learning.
We will look at that. Yes.
I think we have Director Flores. Do you have a comment? And then let's go to Director De La Cruz.
I'll pass.
Oh, okay. And then I'll go back to Director Medina.
I just had one question about whether or not this investment would also allow us to leverage placement of EV charging stations in all of the places where there are also solar arrays.
Isaaco, you want to help out with that one? I know we talked about that.
Yes. So, Board Member De La Cruz, thank you for your question. The construction method for the arrays that will be located in the parking lots involves, obviously you can imagine that there's the solar array where the electricity is produced, and then the electricity has to get back to the point of interconnection, or the main panel on each campus. That does provide an opportunity for putting in slightly oversized conduit, or what we call future ready stubbed up conduit, or even electrical terminals that allow for the future installation of EV charging stations in the arrays that are in a parking lot. That oversized conduit to get extra electrical wiring to that area is priced into the project. So some of that is already future ready. The actual distribution of those stubs and the installation of the car chargers is not. That would allow for future adoption, yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I will point out that that was something that Eric consistently throughout the process made sure that was an important part because he was aware of how important it is to folks in the district. Thank you, Eric.
And Director Medina.
Thank you. First, does someone know about how much we spend annually right now on electricity?
Actually, Scott, I think you guys had those numbers, didn't you?
We do, and I'm so embarrassed I don't have that file open right now. If you give me a few minutes, I could quickly scramble to find that number, but it's Gabe, do you remember? I think it's over $2 million a year in electricity.
Substantial, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the year one savings. It says about $145,000. So I'm trying to figure out kind of what percentage of that is. So if it's about 2 million, that sounds like what? Less than 10% savings that we would have on electricity costs. And then the 30 million figures over a 30-year period, but we're looking at a 25-year contract, it sounds like, correct? But just with the quick numbers, I'm just assuming that that is based on an assumption of rate increases of, well, sounds like significant. So I'm wondering what is like the average rate increase that you guys use to make that assumption of a $31 million savings? Is it, because I mean, right now it seems like that's maybe an over-exaggerated savings based on what I'm looking at in terms of year one. And is year one like a full year savings, or is that like as stuff is still being built, would year two be a much greater percentage?
Yeah, so the model that you're looking at there is a couple different factors to play in here. First, the power purchase agreement does have a 1-year annual escalator for the cost of electricity that you would be purchasing from Ridgeway Solar DC LLC. So that cost for the electricity generated from the solar arrays will go up by 1% per year. The model uses the next 2 years from PG&E at a 6% rate increase above your current, because that's what they have publicly filed with the CPUC, and then uses a 3% annual escalator of the electricity costs from PG&E. That's consistent with what their historical annual rate increases have been. So when you see that savings continue to grow, it's due in part to the fact that your rate of escalation under the power purchase agreement is much lower and compounds relative to the historical average and modeled average for PG&E. The second thing I would say is that the agreement between the district and Jewett Capital is a 25-year agreement. The 30-year number that you saw at the beginning of Eric's PowerPoint assumes a district buyout of the array in year 25 and thereby provides those 5 years of additional savings without having to buy the electricity because the district would own it. And that was asked of us to model in 30 years, in part because the rated life cycle of the panels is 30 years.
So do we know about what percent of savings that would be at the end? Right now it's about 7.5% year one. By the end of year 25, year 30, about how much percentage would we be saving a year? Do we know?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I could quickly do some math I am a graduate of Pioneer High School. I could do that math pretty quickly, but it would take me a few minutes.
I think I just kind of really wanted to point out that the percentage that we're saving is kind of low compared to what it sounds like when it's a dollar figure. But I think what they explain, it does increase over time, how much percentage we're saving. And I think that's a positive in the long term.
Okay, would someone like to entertain a motion? Okay, question from Director Fong.
This project, it's the threshold for it to be a PSA agreement. Is that true?
Yes.
I make a motion.
Sorry, it's a discussion item. I had the wrong thing highlighted here. Sorry.
It's an action
It's
item.
discussion item. Oh, no, it's not.
It's in
Yeah,
there.
you threw me off my game there, Director Fong.
It is action
So
item.
we do need a motion on this.
I'd like to make a motion, Resolution 2022-2311, approving certain findings pursuant to Government Code Section 421712 and authorizing district staff to execute a power purchase agreement and related easement with Ridgeway Avenue DG Solar LLC for the design, construction, installation of solar facilities and related purchase of energy.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Fong and second by Director De La Cruz. Call for the vote.
Director Bowie. Aye. Director Fong.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. All right, moving on to E3, which is a discussion item, consideration of the feasibility of school improvement bond measure for Santa Rosa City Schools. And I will turn it back over to Superintendent Trunell.
Thank you. I just want to thank our Sizer Co. And also Mr. Traber for joining us this evening for that item. We bring forward to you item E3. If we could please have our guests, Charles Heath and Brian Godby, to join us for this item.
Yes, I will bring them over.
All right, and as they are moving forward, tonight we are bringing forward a discussion to the board as a follow-up to our May discussion with the board regarding the feasibility of a bond measure for the November 8th, 2022 ballot. We have guests tonight who are going to be presenting information to the board for consideration. Again, tonight is just a discussion. We will bring forward a potential action item to the August 10th board meeting. And I'd like to welcome Charles and Brian. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to one of you. I can't remember.
I think Brian will start it off by sharing the results of our recently completed public opinion survey.
Great, thank you, Charles. Can everybody see the presentation now? I just shared it.
Yep.
Thumbs up, great, thank you, Superintendent. So my name is Brian Godby from Godby Research, and we've done survey research for you for past measures, and happy to be here again this evening presenting the data from our recent survey. The objectives of this survey were pretty straightforward. We wanted to look at the direction of the economy, since that's obviously an issue right now. But the main purpose is to identify support for a bond measure or bond measures that would upgrade and repair schools. We also wanted to look at different projects and programs that might be funded with the proceeds. We look at informational and critical statements, so we're kind of testing what happens in the real world. And then we look at different rates and different durations. There's, of course, a wide variety of demographic and behavioral characteristics that we used initially to validate that the sample is representative of the district, but then we can also segment the data as well. Moving on to the methodology in a little more detail, this was an online and phone survey. Of course, online means that we are inviting likely November 2022 voters via email and text to our survey. It does not mean that we're posting a link on social media and everybody in the world can join it. So it's a very select and specific portion of our sample. We were in the field from June 23rd through the 30th. The average phone survey was 25 minutes long, which we still use as our metric for determining length. And the sample size was 819 overall in the high school district, which is, as you all know, is bigger than the Santa Rosa Elementary District, as there are other feeder districts that are not part of the Santa Rosa City Schools. That gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 3.4% at the high school level and plus or minus 5.07% in the Santa Rosa Elementary, different in the non-Santa Rosa Elementary School District, but we will look at that separately because it's instructional for the high school district portion of the sample. So moving into the data, the first question we have here is our hypothetical bond measure. This is for the high school district, so this was asked of the entire sample. You see the wording on the right-hand side of the slide. It meets all the statewide requirements legally. It doesn't exceed 75 words. It expresses how much the bond total would be, in this case, $398 million. It has a tax rate, which is 3 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, which is required by law. And it also shows how much it raises annually, which is about $20 million. That too is required by law. And then, of course, the term as well, the bonds are outstanding. So this is the initial question. The way we judge feasibility is we add the definitely and probably yeses together, and you see that we're at 64%. With no more information than just the ballot question that is on the right-hand side of the slide. And obviously, since a Prop 39 bond requires 55% to be successful, we're in pretty good place to start, even given the margin of error that I talked about earlier. The next question is the elementary bond. Now, this is a smaller sample. It's only in the elementary district. And the same thing is true here. We've got the wording on the right-hand side of the slide. And again, looking at the definitely and probably yes, as you see here, we're at 72% in round numbers. So even a little better. And that's pretty typical in districts like yours. We generally see the elementary district doing better than the high school district. And even in more traditional high school elementary districts, where they're separate and don't have the common administration, we see the same pattern. So I'm not surprised at that at all. The next set of questions was a much longer list. This was all the things that we might spend the money on. And so we asked the respondents if they'd be much more likely, somewhat less likely, or much less likely to support the measure based on knowing that some of the money would be spent for this individual project in this long list. And when we're done with the interviewing, we go back and assign numeric values, and you see those across the bottom of the slide, 2, 1, -1, -2. And we use those to construct what we call an intensity score or intensity scale, and that's the 0.93, 0.89. It's a really hyper-accurate way to rank these items vis-a-vis each other. It's also pretty obscure, except to a statistician. So we also add the much more likely percentages and the somewhat more likely percentages together. And that's what's reflected in the blue percentages and range on the far right-hand side of the slide. So it puts it in context of that 55% threshold necessary to be successful with a Prop 39 bond measure. We also group them into statistical groupings that are essentially tied. We call those tiers. Everything on this slide is in tier 1. It's at the top of the list. They're essentially tied. There's some numeric differences, but it's within that margin of error that we talked about at the outset. So to look at the details, provide updated equipment for classroom science and computer labs and libraries is at the top of the list. That's 69%, at least somewhat more likely to support the measure. Update classroom science labs, classrooms, technology, and art and music facilities is just slightly lower. Repair and replace outdated portable classrooms and inefficient heating, cooling, electrical, and plumbing systems is third. Update classroom science labs and classroom technology and job training facilities. So a slightly different spin on the STEM and other things like job training, career tech. Upgrade classroom computers and computer learning technology and technology infrastructure. Update classrooms and classroom technology for current educational standards improve campus security, fire and earthquake safety, and repair or replace outdated, aging, and deteriorated temporary portable classrooms. Again, all these range from a high of 69% to a low of 63%, so all well above the 55% threshold. When we go to the next slide and the remaining items that we tested, you see that we start at that mid 60s, but we work down, and fairly quickly by the middle of the list, we're within the margin of error vis-a-vis a 55% threshold. So while these are important educational goals, they're just not as important to the average voter. And the items on the first slide are really the focus of the message for this kind of measure, should the board decide to put a measure on the ballot. The next slide does the same thing. The first one was for the other feeder districts other than Santa Rosa Elementary. So that's that part of the high school district that would just be looking at a single measure. This is the same list for the part of the high school district that contains your elementary district and would be looking at two measures. And we separate them out because the messaging is potentially different because it's one versus two measures. And that's common again in all of the districts like yours that have the joint administration that we've done this for, San Rafael, Modesto, and a variety of other districts that are similar. So here you see pretty much the same ranking. This is a little higher because it's the elementary again. And you'll remember that for the first ballot test, the elementary tested a little bit higher overall. And again, that's not surprising. The pattern is the same here. I won't read through all of these because they're essentially the same, although again, it's a different geography. The next set of questions is broken down the same way, the other elementary feeder districts versus Santa Rosa Elementary. This is the other first. This is informational items. So these are accountability provisions and other factual statements about the measure. The scale is a little bit different. It's just much more likely, somewhat more likely, no effect. And that impacts how these intensity numbers are calculated. It still all works the same way. You just can't compare a 1.22 here with the previous sets of questions, but you can compare the percentages that are at least somewhat more likely. So at the top of this list, we have all money raised by this measure will be controlled locally and will go to our local high schools and cannot be taken by the state. And that fact is really the accountability component that people like the most. We see this at the top of almost every list. So it's not surprising that it's here at the top as well. By law, none of the money will be used for administrator salaries is number 2. The measure will improve science classrooms and labs and support opportunities for computer science, biology, biotech, et cetera. And that's it, number 3, and right in the middle of this list. Measure requires independent citizens oversight. That's another accountability provision that tests well routinely. The measure ensures that all Santa Rosa High School district students will have access to the same state-of-the-art education as other students in the county. And then finally, rounding out Tier 1, we have the measure will ensure the district can provide every student with the opportunity to prepare for college and careers. Again, Tier 1 ranges from a high of 70%, which is well above the 55% threshold, to 61%, which is still above that threshold, but with the margin of error, it's getting a little closer, but it still exceeds the 55% level. The remainder of the questions are at a lower level, and as you can see quickly, with the margin of error or even without it, are below the 55% threshold. So while, again, they may be important educational needs, they're just not testing as well for the average voter. And again, the next set of questions does the same list again, but we're separating it by elementary districts, the other districts, other feeders versus the Santa Rosa Elementary. And you see the same pattern that we saw before here. None of the money can be taken away by the state at the top of the list, administrator salaries. But what's notable is, again, everything here is higher. This is a high of 75, a low of 68. So just like we saw in the last set of questions and even the ballot question that we started with, there's more support in the elementary district than there is in the non-Santa Rosa feeder districts. So at this point, we've talked about what we might spend the money on and some of the factual statements about the measure, as well as accountability provisions. We come back to our ballot questions a second time. This is the high school measure. We started at 64%. We go up to 69%. That's what we would expect to happen after people hearing about the measure, the details, and that's exactly what happens. Not only does the total increase, but the definitely yes goes up as well, but well above the 55% threshold, so a really good indication of support for the measure. For the elementary measure, same thing happens. We started at 72%. We're now up to 75%, and the definitely yes goes from 40 to 46. So that increases as well. Again, well above the 55% threshold, and certainly a little better, as we've seen on all the other questions, than the high school measure by itself. So now we switch to the other side of the coin, and we talk about the negative statements. It's important to note that the critical statements here are among the entire district, so we're not segmenting it by elementary for these purposes. But we also rotated in the survey the informational and critical statements. So half of the respondents got the informational first, then the critical. The other half got the critical first, and then the informational. And we do that because that matches what happens in the real world should you put this kind of measure on the ballot. And the methodology is the same as the informational statements. We don't put a minus sign in front of the numbers to make them seem bad. The higher they are, the worse they are for the measure. And at the top of this list, we see that the state has a surplus billions of dollars that should be used to build and renovate schools. We shouldn't ask local taxpayers for money. That's 47%, at least somewhat more likely to oppose the measures or measure, depending on which part of the district we're in. And that is just slightly above the 45% threshold that could defeat a Prop 39 bond, but it's not a dramatic negative. Then we go down from there. The next is with residents and business still recovering from the pandemic and increasing gas and grocery prices and high inflation. Now is not the right time at 0.75, a little bit lower than the first one. The district has too many high-paid administrators, a pretty typical anti-tax argument that you hear in district after district that we work in. The school district has a history of mismanagement of public money. If they learned to manage money better, we wouldn't need this measure. While not true, it's a pretty typical anti-tax measure or argument that we hear over and over again. Local voters are being asked to renew a sales tax increase and increase funding for preschool and childcare. That is a reference to the city measure, which is going to appear on the ballot. But it's not a knockout by any stretch of the imagination. And from there, we slip into the tier 2, which are all negative, and we need to be aware of them, but they're nowhere near that 45% threshold that could defeat a Prop 39 bond measure. So after we've talked about what we'd spend the money on, the informational statements, the critical statements, we come back to our ballot question a third time. Now, in the middle test, we expected the numbers to go up because we just heard the positive side of the coin. In this case, we've just heard the negative side of the coin, so we do expect the numbers to go down. And so our initial test was 64 for the high school in round numbers, and we're at 64 after the negatives for the high school. So again, above the 55% threshold. And even though we've just done all the negatives, we're still in pretty good shape. Because we didn't know where we were going to wind up on either of these measures, we had a fallback, and that was to reduce the rate. So we basically said, instead of levying 3 cents per hundred, what if it was 1.9 cents per hundred of assessed valuation? And you see, while we get a little bit of a bump, it's not really dramatic. And it's hard to say that we need to, because we're at 64% to start, that we need to reduce the rate. Although this is just slightly stronger numerically, but again, not statistically speaking, they're really tied. moving back to the elementary measure, again, we started at 72. In this case, we're at 70 after the negatives. So a little bit lower, but again, with a 15-point cushion over the 55% threshold that we need to be successful. And again, we did a fallback, same thing, instead of 3 cents per 100 of assessed valuation, what if it was 1.9? And you see we get a little bit of a bump here again, but again, not statistically significant. It's what we'd expect to see. Because we were pretty strong on that third test, again, I don't really see a need to be reducing the rate from a survey perspective. And the last question is just one that puts this all in context a little bit. We did ask about the future of the economy, and what we saw is that 10% think it's going to be better in the fall. About 32% think it's about the same, which means where we are now, which is certainly not good. And then worse is 52%. And well, that seems bad, and it certainly is. People are fairly pessimistic. This is not the worst I've seen. I've seen this be as high as 63% in the last 3 weeks. So throughout the year, we've seen these numbers getting progressively more pessimistic across all the different agencies that we've surveyed. So I'm not surprised at this. It's all baked into those numbers. So even though people are somewhat pessimistic, they're still willing to support a high school and an elementary bond in Santa Rosa. So that's quite encouraging. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions now or after Charles talks a little bit more about the next steps in the planning horizon at the board's discretion.
Thank you, Brian. Just really quick here. We are already 17 minutes past when we were supposed to switch our interpreter. So Brian can grab some water, we'll take a breath, and we're going to switch our interpreter in our virtual feed, and then we will continue.
Thank you, Vice President McCormick. Gabriela, you are now in our Spanish channel. If you could please unmute.
Are we good? Or are we still switching? Sorry, I missed that.
I am not quite there.
Okay, no rush.
I think we're going to go ahead and I'm going to just double check that it's correct. If someone can check from the Spanish channel, but I think we're good to continue on with the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Director Flores has a question before we continue.
Yeah, so I couldn't find anywhere in here where which tax rate seemed to be the most favorable one in terms of what the public thought, because you had 3 different ones, right? So was that asked, or do we have any incline as to what that might be?
So we had 2 different tax rates, and let me go back to the high school measure. On the 3 tests, the first test, the middle test, and the third test, we asked 3 cents per 100. And so on our last test, we got 64% in round numbers at 3 cents. Because we didn't know where we would wind up and whether we would need to go at a lower rate, we did have the fallback question, which was instead of 3 cents, what if it's 1.9? And so you see the difference here is marginal at best. We go from 63 point, sorry, I'll just scroll back, 63.7 to 64.3. So it's a 0.6 difference in terms of the lower rate. I mean, it makes sense that at lower rate, we would get a higher level of support, but it's not statistically significant. So it's hard to say that we have to go to a lower rate in order for this to be successful. I think it can be successful at the 3 cents. Now, obviously, this is a board decision, but there's no data in the survey that suggests we need to be lower than the 3 cents per $100 of assessed valuation.
Did you say 3 cents per 100? I mean, I'm
Right.
looking at the high school district here and it says tax rate is $30 per 100.
Well, so
100,000. Got it. It's 100,000.
it's the same. It's the same
Yeah,
number.
it's the same rate. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But this is the way it's required to be in the voter handbook. So that's
Right.
why we use this. In the past, that wasn't as clear, but courts have sort of said, no, you need to be consistent. And so that 3 cents per 100 is sort of the model that the court adopted.
All right, that's the language we'll use. Got
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Director Medina.
Thank you. So I just wanted to be clear on, in the language that goes on the ballot, we're kind of like broad in terms of how the money is going to be spent because we don't know the specific projects, correct?
I can address that one, Brian. So the language that you see on the right-hand side of Brian's slide there represents basically our approximation of the ballot question that we put on the ballot. That's legally limited to 75 words. And so obviously you have a very limited space to describe the types of projects that the bond would fund. Accompanying this in the voter pamphlet that will be mailed to all registered voters prior to the election will be published the full project list. If you put a bond measure on the ballot, that project list would be part of the resolution that you adopt to place the measure on the ballot. And that contains the more detailed description of all the projects that are eligible for bond funding. So this is the brief summary. That project list is where the detail is provided to voters.
The reason I bring that up is just in terms of like that project list. I know that we have like a list of priority projects that we need to get done, but in terms of at this point, when we put this on the ballot, there's no room for changing that or collaborating with staff or whoever to figure out which projects we do because it's already restricted to those. Or is there the ability to kind of like modify as we go or maybe prioritize within those projects, which goes first? I don't know if we could get more clarification on that.
The project list is fairly general and flexible. And what we've worked with your bond counsel so far is to basically develop a project list that would enable you to fund the projects that are in your adopted master plan that weren't completed as part of the prior measure.
Okay, so then we would later be able to go in and collaboratively work together with the teachers or staff or whoever within our district to figure out what gets actually done, because I don't think we're ever always able to complete everything.
Right. So if I may too, that was one of my questions that I was going to hold on how malleable this is, because we're expected to build facilities for TK, right, by 2025, and that's a huge undertaking. So can we add that to the master plan at this juncture?
Well, what we can do is add it to the project list so that and I believe it is in the project list already, at least in the draft form. So you would have the ability to use funds for that purpose. So the way the process typically works is, you take the project list to the voters. It's pretty broad and all encompassing to maximize flexibility for the district. Assuming voters approve the bond measure, then, as you issue bonds, you make decisions about what priority projects you want to tackle first. That's part of that collaborative process to get input from district stakeholders and make decisions on specifically what you want to fund within that project list based on available dollars.
And based on the numbers that we have here in front of us, how aggressive of a campaign do we need to do by November?
I'll start answering that question, Brian, and then you can feel free to chime in as well. I have to say, you know, Brian and I have done surveys for dozens of school districts up and down the state over the last 6 months or so. And these are among the strongest poll results I've seen for school bond measures. So despite the economic challenges and whatnot out there in the environment, Santa Rosa voters seem, resilient and supportive of the schools. So, and I'll talk, actually, Brian, would you mind going to my timeline slide? Because I'll use that to answer this question. There's sort of two pieces to, I think, what you're alluding to. One is if you give us direction tonight to proceed with, planning and preparing measures for the November 2022 ballot, our first step would be to utilize the district's ability to provide impartial information to the public about your facility needs and the bond measure that you're proposing. So the school district can't use public funds to advocate for the passage of the measure, but you can provide impartial information to the public. So we would be doing that quickly here as the district is finalizing the process of qualifying for the ballot. And then actually, if you go to the next slide, Brian, August 12th is the deadline to qualify for the November ballot. So we would bring the resolutions back to you on August 10th for consideration. And assuming you move forward to place those measures on the ballot, we would then move into that advocacy campaign phase. And, how strong a campaign do you need? Again, given the economic uncertainty and whatnot, you need, some campaign to make sure voters are hearing reasons to support the measure. And, there's always the potential that opposition materializes. So you'll want to be able to counteract that. But I think that given that your support levels are, roughly 10 to 15 points above the passage threshold, it can be kind of a, I think a fairly modest campaign effort and still expect to be successful.
Thank you.
We have Director Fong and then Director De La Cruz.
Thank you to, oh gosh, TBWBH, is that how you say it? Mr. Godby, Mr. Heath. It was good to hear that you talked about the strong results from your polling. Can I ask you now, what stood out for you in what you heard? Like anything different since you've done it so much? Anything different stood out for you for Santa Rosa City Schools?
The two things that stood out for me are one that Charles alluded to earlier. We have told lots of clients in the last 6 months that they can't be on the ballot. You have the option in this economic climate. The other thing that stood out for me is that while throughout the year, the pessimism about the economy has gotten worse and worse and worse, your district is a little less pessimistic. And so it sort of bucked the trend there. And both of those, I think, are encouraging and suggest that, if the board so desires, you can go forward with this, as Charles mentioned.
Director De La Cruz.
Thanks. I had two questions, and maybe I'll kick myself for asking the first one. What stood out in terms of any negative comments that you heard that you think important for us to address prior to making this decision?
Yeah, I think the biggest negative was the one that was at the top of the list, and that's the state has a surplus of billions of dollars. I think it's something that an opponent or an opposition campaign could raise. I don't think it's something the average voter thinks about. They're not spending the state surplus on a daily basis, so it's not top of mind. Somebody would have to raise it as a potential negative. But I think if it is, then you just, address, well, that's just not the way the state budget works. And even if it was all allocated to school construction projects across the state, that would be a really small portion for Santa Rosa.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
it's
that.
actually, as opposition arguments go, it's a fairly easy one to rebut because, while there is a state surplus, that isn't money directly available to you for facility improvements. And, these are large scale projects. Bond measures are essentially the, only realistic means that school districts have to make significant investments in their facilities. So, I think that's an argument you can deal with. Probably the tougher one is just is this the right time to do this given the economy? But, we're seeing strong supermajority support for this measure, and we polled in the midst of inflation and high gas prices and, stock market volatility. So all that's baked into the results. So, I think we're testing, realistic numbers here, not overly rosy numbers that then might be, eroded by economic downturn that's already built into this.
Thanks for that. My second question is about, this ties into the argument around there being existing money within the state that's sufficient, which I think is, as you mentioned, a losing argument. It's not sufficient. But is there any consideration that we consider a clause or something to recognize that this money should supplement but not supplant? Essentially, we should spend existing money that we have that is flowing from the state to continue to keep up, to maintain, to improve our facilities, and that this would kind of be, the really important ingredient that would allow us to do that well. But that supplement versus supplant clause, is that something that is something that we can pull on, or is that just too in the weeds at this point?
We didn't poll on that. It's certainly a concept that is, frequently included in ballot measures, and, we could certainly discuss that with your bond counsel about including that. But I think that would be the concept here anyway, is this would be supplemental on top of any other resources available to the district to improve facilities.
Thank you.
Director Fong.
Thank you. For a superintendent, and you don't have to answer now, but let's just be thinking about, and Director Medina referenced this earlier, what is this current status of the master facilities plans of each of our schools? Make sure that we're updating those, and also with new technology, we're updating those, but also with TK, and how that is going to be, falls under the umbrella of what the bonds say. And I think that, there's been some criticism of our district about how we handled the last bond measures, but I think we did a fine job in a tough situation. The changing situation and the incredible deferred maintenance that we faced. That so much money was gobbled up by locks, doors, cameras, hardening schools, ridiculous, but that's the status of what we need to do. Also HVAC. And so a lot of stuff that was on those master facilities, Director Oding, you know this, did not get addressed. Having written the master facility plan for a high school, we barely touched it. It was all deferred maintenance. And so really, we're going to our locality, we're going to our citizens, we're going to the people in our community when the state is not giving us any money whatsoever for facilities, none. They're giving it for masks, right? For cleaning supplies, but we're not getting it to upgrade schools. And I can hardly wait to start working on this measure, all these measures. But it's going to take all of us. And when we hear, and President Howell, I'm speaking kind of to you, when we hear that people are wishing that they had more collaboration, the teachers, absolutely, we want your input. And we are getting your input. We'll continue to get your input. But finally, teachers, you're really teachers, and I was a teacher, right? As was Jill, ever. We only know one part. We only know a slice of how things are. And when we look at the big picture, the 360 of what we need facilities to do, as teachers, we don't see that. And we think it's not important, but it's vitally important. So it's just going to take all of us to pitch in, to be behind this 110% to get this passed for our kids.
I want to go to public comment on this. So we have one here in the house. Our first one is Margie Bradley Long.
Good evening. Thank you. I think creating good decision-making processes is an enormous challenge. And I think figuring out how to do that in a way that's inclusive, that's transparent, that has good communication is a really high ask. To move forward with this without having updated our facilities master plan doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think those do need to be revisited. I think things have changed and we haven't updated those. We all want the best results. We all know that there is a great deal of need. And it seems like if we put our ducks in a row and we let people know this is the way we're going to go through the decision making and this is how your voice will be heard, we can all be on board together. It would be just really sad to me. Last time we were promised that there would be really good decision-making things in process and that we would be included, and our voice was not included. So it's really hard to, that promise isn't going to be enough this time. And Lori, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think, like, you knew a lot about your master plan. You knew a lot about the needs of your campus. I think that there is a wealth of information that is on our campuses and that our teachers and our staff do have. And I think there's an intimate knowledge of the facilities. And I think we need to honor that, and we need to include that in how we're making our decisions. So without a process, it's really impossible to be supportive, because last time there wasn't a process was promised, it didn't happen. And there's a lot of frustration over some things that didn't get taken care of that should have, or didn't get communicated out that should have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go virtually. That's all the cards I have here. So
If there's any members of the audience that are joining the meeting on Zoom and would like to make a public comment on item E3, please raise your virtual hand at this time. Our first speaker is Margaret Boone.
Hi, I just wanted to say, even though so much money was spent on deferred maintenance last time, there's still so much more deferred maintenance at our schools. Our bathrooms are horrible. Our concrete or asphalt is all cracked. We have mold in classrooms. We have classrooms with dry rot. So there's just so much more deferred maintenance that I think really has to be addressed before anything else, except maybe technology. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you.
I hate that.
There are no other hands raised.
okay. Real quickly, Brian and Charles, is there more to the presentation? Because I know we started asking questions.
Nope, we've covered the presentation. The timeline and deadlines were the last piece.
Okay, great. I have something to say, but I see our student board member's hand, so I'm going to call on Director Dewey.
Just a quick question. Is this presentation attached to the discussion item, or like, are we able to access it through our own time?
It is not attached to the discussion item. We walked in this presentation, but it will be attached to the minutes. So you will have access to it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I just want to say briefly that I am strongly in support of pushing this forward and doing what we need to do to get this passed for our schools, our teachers, our students, our communities. But I would push and challenge staff when this comes, I think on the calendar, when this comes forward as an action item, that process be included for both our master plan, evaluations or updates, and the input process that we're going to have when I'm manifesting when we pass this bond. So I would like that included in the presentation when it comes to action, which I believe would be on August 10th. Do we have any other discussion? Director Medina.
Just following up on what you said, Director McCormick. Yeah, I think if there's very little time between now and our next meeting, but I would ask Superintendent Trinell if maybe you could facilitate something with our different bargaining units in terms of maybe just developing some sort of collaborative process that we could kind of agree on how things would work on in the future as we follow through with the bond. Because I feel our time is limited in terms of getting this on there and doing what we got to do to put it on the ballot. But I do think it's necessary to have it on the ballot. But I think for me, it would be really important to have something at that same meeting presented that hopefully our bargaining units are able to lend some time to collaborating on so that we could have something presented and maybe we could at least have some discussion or agreement upon at that time. That's all. Thank you.
And I'll
Director Flores. Oh, sorry. Superintendent Trinnell, do you want to respond to that?
just wanted to acknowledge the request, and we will certainly offer up the potential for an opportunity. Some representatives are not on contract yet. They're still on vacation. So we'll see what we can do. This will obviously include a larger committee that will be assisting us with this process as well.
Director Flores.
So before I say what I'm going to say, I want to say that I am in support of making sure that we move forward with this. Now, having said that, I'm extremely frustrated because I brought up this master plan issue with our previous superintendent, Dr. Kitamura, and our current superintendent months and months ago to make sure that we had a plan in action and to change the master plan as things happen. So I just want to say that I'm very frustrated at this juncture that we are here 15 days before this goes into the ballot measure, right? And we're talking about changing the master plan. It's just, I'm speechless, right? I've been asking for this for for months since I was elected in 2020. So it's just, to me, it seems a little bit myopic to do it at this juncture, right? Knowing that there were so many changes coming up the pike. Having said that, okay, that's my frustration, okay? I am in full support of this bond, and I want to make sure that we work fully with everyone involved to make sure that we pass something that is meaningful, something that is meaningful for not just for for our teachers, but for our students and all stakeholders. And we need to do it swiftly and quickly to make sure that we we do our deferred maintenance and that we have the funding that we need to upkeep our district. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap our discussion on this, and thank you very much, Charles and Brian. The numbers are make me optimistic, but we have a lot of work to do. So we look forward to getting to work on that. Okay, moving on to E4, which is also a discussion item, staff and student COVID testing update. And I will turn it back over to Superintendent Trinnell.
Thank you. And just a quick thank you to Charles and Brian for being with us and presenting tonight. Moving on to the next item, if we could bring Mr. Jones over. Tonight, board, we bring a discussion forward as an update regarding testing and the availability of testing. And I know that Mr. Jones will go over those particulars with you as soon as he is moved over. There is a PowerPoint presentation in the board agenda. Mr. Jones will be reviewing that with us tonight. This is not an action item. We will bring forward additional information regarding our overall updates to the COVID plan at the August 10th board meeting. This is to provide an update to the board around testing opportunities. And with that, I do welcome Mr. Jones as a panelist.
Thank you, Superintendent Trinnell. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. And
We can hear you, but I don't know if your mic's, we don't hear you overhead.
Is it on? Hello?
Now it's better. Yeah, I
Okay.
think you just need to lean
I'm
into
going to
it.
get up right next to it then.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the board. And thank you for making this time for me. I appreciate it very much. I know you've had a lot in your evening, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move through this fairly quickly. I only have 7 slides, but I also want to make some time for any Q&A you may have based on the information that I'm going to be sharing. So Let me just get up here to share my screen. Let's see. Share. This top one. Doesn't like it.
Same problem we had.
Sorry. Thank you.
Quit it. Leave it, just run, come right back.
Okay. I'll be right back. Okay. Thank you, Rand. That's what he's there for. Okay. Thank you for your patience. About that whole thing about moving through it quickly, forget about it. Whoa, hang on. Am I good? Yeah, I'm muted. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Anyway. It's not there. Let me move this. I can't get to my screen. I know. There. Okay, thank you. And then slideshow. Can you see that? Hot dog. Yay. You know, technology makes life so much easier. So there's a lot of moving pieces yet to be kind of put into place and kind of polished up a little bit in preparation for the coming school year. And you'll be hearing some more things about those at the next board meeting, as Superintendent Tornell mentioned. So tonight, what I really want to focus on specifically is some changes that took place over the summer break that helped us get prepared into a sort of a new series of testing opportunities for the coming school year. And among the things I want to address is the reduction in county sourced testing opportunities, concerns for the increasing COVID transmissibility for a variety of reasons that I'll get into momentarily. And of course, the continuing testing mandates that were last updated back in April for both unvaccinated employees and for volunteers. And then the large scale transition with the California Department of Public Health, moving from PCR-based testing, the lab-based testing, to antigen-only testing, which includes both professional and over-the-counter testing that they're putting most of their eggs into the basket of. And then finally, the CDPH sponsored a professionally administered, this is a mouthful, in-house SRCS testing through the California COVID-19 Testing Task Force, an effort that we've put in place to address all of the points that just came before it. So I'm going to jump right into those things if I may. What started this in motion was in April, the Sonoma County Department of Public Health indicated that they were needing to, based on an assessment of their budget and plans moving forward, needed to reduce or remove, in some circumstances, the active COVID-19 rapid testing resources and programs that were in place around the county in several sites. And one of those sites was in place at the Lewis Early Learning Academy. And they had at that time, Monday and Friday, twice weekly, free to the public rapid testing program that allowed people to kind of come, in their cars, do it just a drive-through testing program. So when that was conveyed through Superintendent Tornell that we were losing that at one of our sites, there was immediately a response that we really wanted to have some kind of active program in place to not necessarily replace that in its entirety, but to have something active that we could still utilize to benefit our staff and students at our CCS. And then secondly, in June, California Department of Public Health announced a prioritized resourcing for support for antigen testing, both as I mentioned, professional and over the counter for K-12 settings in lieu of the current PCR-based testing operations. Current PCR testing programs that we've been involved with are to be phased out by or around early August, with one caveat that we are still one of few active candidates for a potentiality of retaining a pool testing program that I can't say much about yet. It's still in the works, but there's a possibility that may still be active for us to take benefit of in the next month or two, and you'll hear more about that in the future. So in terms of the increasing transmissibility and the related needs for ongoing testing, so CDPH has expressed growing concern for increased transmissibility of the emerging COVID variants. It seems like every other day now, there's just more information about that in terms of what we're learning about about not just the variants, but the subvariants and the ways that they're spreading. And right now that we have what is the variant BA5, I guess it is, that is now the dominant variant. And it just seemed that just a few months ago that didn't even exist. So it moves pretty quickly. We have an anticipation of a surge or surges in case positivity with regards to the following cumulative factors. One being return to campus in the next couple of weeks, which typically brings to campuses all the various things that students collected over the course of summer, and that includes in their summer travels and all the different things that might bring with them in terms of potential molecular risks. On top of over-the-counter positive non-reporting, along with the prioritizing of over-the-counter testing that they want to get into hands of folks, there is this understanding that for the most part, folks who are using their own over-the-counter tests at home or otherwise, they're not necessarily using the built-in mechanisms to report positive cases. So it's to some extent guesswork in gauging really how much active COVID is out in our communities due to this. Now another factor, of course, is the known asymptomatic presence of COVID for a number of people who test positive, but don't have symptoms, and sometimes don't have symptoms, and as a result, don't even feel compelled to test. And so as a result, not really being aware of the potential risk they might be to themselves or those around them. And then finally, pervasive COVID social negligence. People who just generally, for the most part, take a stance that COVID is over, or that just forgetting or getting back to, through these reintroduction of routines that feel for the most part that things are back to normal, we've kind of dropped some of our protections. And as a result, either by intent or just, forgetting, people are at risk. And so all of these things cumulatively increase the likelihood that we will probably experience some COVID outbreaks, as part of the return to campus and in the successive weeks through August and September and so forth. And then, of course, there's also the high percentage of symptomatic ambiguity in potential positive cases. And this is in reference to things like the last few variants generally being what is called, for the most part, mild relative to earlier variants, but also very symptomatically similar to things like seasonal allergies or cold or flu. And so the idea that we want to have testing available as much as possible for folks so that we can distinguish when there's a COVID positivity as opposed to something like seasonal allergies as well. So these are all concerns with regards to the need for ongoing testing. This is a screenshot from the county Department of Public Health stats in terms of at least known positive case counts. And this is something that we use every week to update not only our case reporting to the county, but then also how we put the screen grabs into the SRCS website so that people can also access and know what kind of case activity we have going on in the district at any given time. I mean, most interestingly to me, I think, is looking back over this, the chart here, where it indicates where we are as opposed to, well, no, this is taken from last week, mid-July, sorry. And while it distinguishes the case counts or the case rises and activity, distinguish between vaccinated and unvaccinated personnel, what I find most interesting is, where we were at this point as opposed to, say, a year ago. And what's the difference? And, for the most part, we're really, really similar for unvaccinated case counts, a bit higher with vaccinated case activity. And again, this is with a complete guess as to really how much activity is out there. And the idea that there's more COVID activity that's unreported that isn't, of course, reflective in these stats. The changes, of course, are the fact that what we have now is, of course, a few months into much more relaxed activity. So a lot less masking, a lot more travel, a lot more activity. A year ago, you didn't have things like concerts and large group gatherings and those kind of things. And those things are now back to normal for the most part. So that, of course, then falls in line with having more COVID spread. And as a result, like the things I mentioned earlier, really kind of puts an emphasis on the need to continue having some testing opportunities available for the benefit of our staff and students. The current requirements, things that we do have to do in context of testing, and that will be active at least through the first part of the school year, unless things change after that, probably through the entirety of the school year. Effective on March 7th, the Sonoma County Department of Public Health returned to once weekly mandated COVID-19 testing for unvaccinated employees, instead of, at the time, it was previously twice weekly. And so this remains in place for the 22-23 school year. And additionally, as per Cal OSHA stipulations, volunteers are also designated as workers and as such are likewise subject to the same employee COVID-19 testing mandates. And so we now have a mechanism in place to help us set that up and be responsive to volunteer presence at our campuses so that we can include them in our testing programs, which I'm really excited about. So it sounds weird to be excited about that. I don't mean it that way, but it's nice to have something in place that is responsive to these needs, that doesn't feel like we're going into the school year behind the 8 ball, because that gets pretty exhausting. So the transition to prioritized antigen testing includes these following factors. Number one, and then this is for the most part based on the priorities as conveyed to me through CDPH, is a really heavy prioritizing of over-the-counter antigen testing kits for at-home self-administering. And that includes distribution through county and state agencies that are outside of my own understanding and awareness, but just kind of getting them out there everywhere. A lot of effort putting into the next month or two to get more and more tests out to individuals and to use in their homes. Secondly, over-the-counter antigen kits for surge distribution through schools as available. So as an example, they're mapping out ways to have large-scale distribution available through county offices, sent to the school districts, and then onward to the schools themselves to be picked up by families for return to campus timeframes. So that includes coming back to campus. Their plan is, and we're still kind of working on the dates and delivery schedules. The plan is, in this case, return to campus, is to have tests for all staff and students available for pickup at school sites the week before school begins, and the same over the course of return from winter break and return from spring break. And then like they did at the beginning of the summer break, having them to take home as they leave school for summer break as well, just having them to use, so that way they come back to campus with a mechanism in place for some assurance of safety, that they themselves are not at risk to those around them, or that others around them aren't at risk to them as well. So that's one of the priorities I have. And then finally, the professionally administered antigen testing through CDPH, California COVID-19 Testing Task Force Rapid Testing Program. And so that's, for the most part, what I'm getting to here is, so what we started doing through reference from the county when I asked them what options we did have when they were removing this program, they said, well, check out this program through rapid testing, the rapid testing program through CDPH. And so we began putting that process into motion immediately and getting resources through CDPH and then getting our personnel set up to make this happen, to be what's called CLIA certified. And we were CLIA certified, which is Clinical Laboratory Information Amendments of 1988, in which there are specific protocols and trainings involved that allow us to operate our own in-house lab within SRCS. And we were certified to do so as of July 2022, earlier this month, to be in compliance with the CDPH program and approved by FDA, specifically through what's called the Vinax Now testing program. And so this program is designed for both symptomatic and asymptomatic staff and student COVID-19 testing and satisfies the employee mandated testing requirements. So it is effective for confirmatory symptomatic testing and routine testing for assurance of non-infectious status. And so this program we're set to have it operational as of August 1st. Sort of as a soft launch and then ready in full swing by the first day of school. Currently operated by the existing contracted maximum staffing personnel that we've been retaining through this process. And we've scaled down based on need, but we still have the ability as a result of that to scale back up for increased surge response as needed, operating out of a room on the Leela campus. But with our certification, we also have the capacity, depending on surge need, to open up satellite stations around the district to have it more easily accessible for those in need, very spaces around town. If we move into a surge circumstance that requires us to do that, and so we can pivot and move, hopefully as quickly as possible, to make that opportunity available for anybody who needs to test. Sorry for a mouthful there, but I hope I was able to convey the basics of it. And at this point, I'm sure you probably have a few questions that maybe I can even answer.
Okay, go
sorry.
ahead.
May I add, thank you, John, for the information. Really good presentation.
Thank you.
I think that I just want to remind everyone how we got here. So at the height of the need for testing, we felt that it was really important that we have a hub, a center that is located within our district boundaries to be able to have as an offer for families and for staff who had symptomatic testing, so that there weren't lines in other places that they were having to wait to get tested. And so we offered that opportunity with the minimizing of staff and funds at the county level, who were our partners at the time. We and John specifically took it on to look into how we could become providers ourselves. And so that's where we're at. We are ready to go. And thank you, John and team, for working through that to ensure that we maintain this level of service for our own community.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for your support and confidence in this process. Appreciate it very, very much. Any other questions you might have?
Okay, questions from the board. Director Fung.
Mr. Jones, thank you so much for your report and for your first COVID report to us, I think.
Well, thank you.
So the protocols pretty much are the same. Masking is not mandated at all, just the unvaccinated testing once a week. Isolation tents are going to be up, that kind of thing.
So for the most part at this point, and as I mentioned earlier, some things will be locked down a little more in detail in preparation for the August 10th board meeting. But yes, we are in most circumstances basically moving into the school year with the same things in place that were updated as of April, as we closed out the school year with a couple of small caveats. I don't yet know what the circumstances are in terms of the requirement for the isolation tents. And so that's another factor that we're trying to lock down. We have we have this framework that was given to us by CDPH, and some of those questions that came up aren't addressed in the framework specifically. So we're looking for clarification on what things are required as opposed to what things are recommended in those kinds of practices that we had on campuses at the end of the school year. As far as masking mandates, that is the same. We are strongly recommending masking, especially in context of the increased transmissibility and the knowledge that we have demographics in this community of vulnerable personnel. We have demographics of multi-generational households. And while I mentioned earlier that for the most part, symptomatic presence is largely diminished for a lot of people with these current variants, some of that extent is because we have also more people now who are vaccinated at this time. But there's always those few cases that get hit really, really hard, and for reasons that are still quite puzzling. Every case is a concern. And so I can't really stress strongly enough that, look, it's one of the three things that helps the most to mitigate spread is the use of a mask. And so it is still strongly recommended, but I can't underscore enough how strongly I personally really support that, except for the case of staff who are returning early from isolation, from quarantine. Those who are allowed to come back because they've tested negative after day 5, who don't have to do the full 10-day quarantine. That's the one stipulation in which they are mandated to continue wearing a mask through day 10, as per stipulation by Cal OSHA. And that is the only specific, speaking in tongues, only specific circumstance in which we have to mandate wearing of a mask. All the rest is just strongly recommended.
Director De La Cruz.
Mr. Jones, thank you so much for your presentation and also just for your enthusiasm and joy for this work. It's really, it's infectious in all the right ways.
Oh, man, boy, don't use that word.
I know, but I'm excited about your excitement and how
you.
strongly how clearly you communicate your concerns, the concerns of the district, and the ways in which we're mitigating those concerns.
Thank you.
So I'm really grateful for you and excited to see you in action this year with us. I had questions about the availability of N95s or KN95s in child sizes at the elementary and then, of course, kind of bigger sizes moving up as we get into secondary education. Will those be available for students and staff on campuses as we go back?
Yes, it took a while through the last school year to actually get our hands on those enough for distribution, and we do have them. And we are making those available for the campuses that have the younger students that will need those. So there's also a mechanism in place through which, and they're used to it now, the school administrators, site administrators can order these materials, these PPE materials through our warehouse system and have them delivered to the site pretty quickly. So yeah.
Excellent. And that's definitely an equity issue because these masks tend to be expensive, the higher quality, the kind of thicker, the KN95 or the N95s, those are just more expensive than the typical masks that tend to be less protective. So grateful to hear that those will all be available in school sites. I guess other questions that I had is, will the state program, which I'm really grateful to hear that we jumped on and are enrolled in, will that give us sufficient coverage for the needs of our district and its size?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the start of that?
Sure. Will our enrollment in the state testing program cover us sufficiently?
I was in a meeting today with the program administrators through CDPH, and that came up quite a bit. And at the moment, it's a difficult thing to answer because they're reserving stock based on how much they have available for distribution and wanted to be equitable in doing so. So we don't have a delivery of stock right now that we can say will get us through the school year. We have sufficient stock of program materials for a duopoly of testing options that we have. I guess I didn't get into that, but I'll mention it briefly. We have two types of testing options that we have that are rapid testing. One, of course, is the lab that we operate, And we have enough of those materials to get us through, I want to say probably the first 2 months of school. And then we have a second resource that they've also provided to us that we make available. They're called IntelliSwab rapid test kits. And we make that available to individuals at test sites who can exercise the option of testing at their test site without having to come to the lab. And that is a self-administered swabbing kit. So we have a number of those we can probably get through several months of those. And then secondly, we have probably something in the area of maybe 20,000 kits coming the week before school starts for distribution to school sites. And that's for the most part, just blowing out to get rid of them right away. We're told that by August 15th, I then have the ability to start placing orders for more fulfillment that I will then get delivered to the district within 10 days. So assuming that, we don't use up all that stock right away, it'll be just a regular routine of placing those orders about every six weeks to 2 months based on what they can provide at that time and the constant rotation of usability here.
Given the reality of so many kids coming back from summer vacation with unintended gifts to their classmates and teachers and staff,
Yeah.
Do we have any plan to provide rapid test kits for families and children to use prior to the first day?
So at this moment, the program that we're certified for is just for staff and students. So it doesn't completely replace what the county was operating out of Leland campus at that time. And that was one of the first concerns moving into it. And I'm still exploring options to make that work. There are some things I've explored through the county to basically add some amendments to our certification to do that. But it would also mean getting some extra resources that right now they can't promise. So that's one of the things that they wanted to do is make sure that they have that prioritizing of getting things out to homes, like people can order through the mail and have them delivered as well. And then if need be, some of the things that we do have set aside in the warehouse and for the IntelliSwab program, if possible, depending on need and availability, that is something we can also shift if need be. The idea is, look, these aren't doing anyone any good in the warehouse.
Yep.
Right. So if we have access to them, just get them out there and make it rain tests. That's the hope. So the plan is to respond as quickly as we can so that we can be, like I said, not behind the 8 ball on this.
I have 2 last questions.
Sure.
The first is, I know we have a number of back to school, whether it's like orientations or picnics at school sites.
Yes.
Do we intend to have rapid tests and information and communications to families to help them prepare for testing before we go back to school?
Indeed. In fact, we kind of were, we were exercising some of that a little bit at the end of the school year with regards to things like graduations and those kinds of things, knowing that we'll have things like back to school night and that kind of stuff going on as well. So there is information in the handbook that outlines what a school site should do to implement best practices to assure as best as they can a safe environment for those that do attend, and some resources and so forth to make that workable for them.
Excellent. My last question is, I'm supportive of continuing to participate in the pooled PCR testing, just given the challenges with reporting on the self-tests, as well as the importance of just making sure that we've got good, solid data from, a regular process. And I also appreciate the way that our pooled system allows for families and children to opt out if wanted, if that's what they want. So that kind of flexibility really appeals to, I think, our larger and very diverse campus on this issue, or diverse district on this issue. What do we need to do to make sure that we are able to continue in that pooled PCR testing program?
So at this moment, one of the factors that was in place with the program is that it was supported by CDPH, and they pulled that support, they PULLED that support for the pool testing. And so the organization through which we were doing that, Concentric, I worked with them and I mentioned to them when they indicated that there was possible changes afoot. I said, well, is there anything that you can do for the coming school year? I think I addressed this with them back in April or May. Please ensure that we are on the front line of discussing this with you because we still have that interest in making something like that happen. And so they did. And like I say, they have been exploring options in terms of what kind of funding mechanisms are in place to keep such a program in place that we don't have to pay for in the district, but that we can still utilize the same resources. So some discussion has already been had about that. I think Superintendent Trunell is also involved in that. At this point, I don't have the answers to what you can do beyond the fact that the discussions are already in place to help ensure that happen. I'm not necessarily aware of the financial components. That's discussion that's outside of my purview. But they are being had, and we are expecting to hear something fairly soon in terms of a couple of different variations of the program that I've asked for. Is knowing what did work and what didn't work, I've asked for some things that will help move forward in a way that I hope balances out the duality of priorities for the district. And one is of course keeping our staff and students safe in a safe environment. But to do what? Well, it's to provide a safe learning environment. And so I know to some extent, a lot of administrators and school personnel bend over backwards to help get this program in the schools and working. And it was very, very complicated to do. And I'm trying in whatever way possible to assure that they still can focus on what their jobs are, is to enable and facilitate good learning without necessarily having to bend over too much backwards to also be the run this program as well. So there's still some discussion and exploration in regards to make that work, but I'm very, very hopeful. And like I said, we were the first district in the state that they came to say, let's figure out how to make this work. And I'm very thankful for that. So I'm pretty sure that it will happen. And the idea that we can utilize this in so many ways to keep ahead of where things are and in a very efficient way in terms of use of resources to track potential spread and respond quickly. So I think the benefits of it outweigh the challenges. And so I'm putting a lot of effort into making that work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to go to, I don't have any cards, so do we have a public comment on this? E4.
If you are a member on Zoom watching the meeting and would like to comment on item E4, please raise your virtual hand at this time. There are no hands raised.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for that report, John. And we will persist.
Indeed, we will. And we will get ahead of this. And I look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of weeks with some more information for going next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are moving to E5, which is an action item, approval of certificated guest teacher and classified substitute salary schedule rates for 2022-23. I'll turn that over to Superintendent Trunell. Actually, it's Assistant Superintendent,
Thank you.
Mr. Shepherd. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Vice President McCormick, members of the board, Superintendent Trunell, and Santa Rosa City Schools community. Before you tonight, for your consideration, we're bringing the substitute guest teacher and classified rates. Just give me a second. I'll pull up my screen. Excuse me. These rates are a continuance from last year. These rates will keep us in the top two in the county for paying for this service, which is a very important, it's very competitive. Excuse me, one change that we're suggesting is paying the $1,500 longevity stipend, paying that in the last supplemental pay period of June. What we found anecdotally, where we had several subs work 40 days, get the 1,500, and many dropped out. So we want to delay that payment because we want to encourage our valuable guest teachers and classified employees to keep subbing as much as they can. So with that, there are no other changes from last year. And so I'll entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I do. So we're renewing this, for another school year. It doesn't seem that this is going to go away, right? So are we going to be renewing these year after year after year? Or is there a point where we just, bite the bullet and make this a permanent sort of rate? What's your take on this?
That's an excellent question. Towards in the spring, we started collecting, actually SCO also assists with that. We collect the sub rates from other districts and what they're projected, for this school year. And we recognized early on that in order for us to stay competitive, that many districts were keeping their pandemic rates. So it very well could be something we entertain down the road, that maybe our increased rates would remain, but that certainly would be something we would analyze and bring back for discussion for your consideration.
If I may add, and please correct me, Mike, but I believe we're also using some one-time funds to assist with this increase. And so therefore it may not be available to us in the future.
Correct. Thank you, Superintendent Trudeau. We would certainly have to also explore budgetary constraints and availability.
So my follow-up question would be, it sounds like all districts are using one-time funds on this. So eventually, it sounds like it's going to level the playing field in terms of sub rates throughout the county. In case it doesn't, we'll revisit this in the near future.
Yes, and I'm also a part of a county HR administrators group that we meet periodically, and this will be topic of discussion as we kind of try to work together and be cohesive.
Thank you. That helps a lot, actually. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go to virtual public comments since I don't have any cards.
If you'd like to make a public comment on item E5, the certificated guest teacher and classified substitute salary schedule rates for 22-23, please raise your virtual hand at this time. There are no hands raised.
Okay, great. I'd like to entertain a motion. Director
Move
Medina.
approval of certificated
I'll-
guest teacher classified substitute salary schedule rates for 2022-23.
I'll second.
Sorry, Omar.
Okay, motion made by Director Fong, a second by Director Medina. Call for the vote.
Director Bowie,
Aye.
Director Fong,
Aye.
Director Medina,
Aye.
Director De La Cruz,
Aye.
Director Flores,
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to E6, also an action item. We have our first read and possible waiver of the second read of Board Bylaw 9250. Superintendent Trudeau.
Thank you, Vice President McCormick, members of the board, those in the audience and online. I bring forward to you tonight what will be an annual potential ask to increase the board member monthly compensation in the amount not to exceed 5% based on the present monthly rate of compensation. Also, I would like to note that our board bylaw 9250 is not updated on our website, and so we will take care of that. But as it stands, per the last increase that the board approved last year in August of 2021, the amount was increased for the board from to 463.05, which is the current rate, and with the 5%, it would be increased to 486.20 per month if the board were to approve this 5% increase tonight going forward for the next year. And there is a resolution here. Excuse me, there is the updated board bylaw, which does demonstrate the strike through of the 463.05 and the addition of the 486.20 for your consideration. The reason why the language here suggests first read and possible waiver of second read is that typically board bylaws, board policies, if you will, have a first and a second, a first read and a second for approval. And so I will hand it back to you, Vice President McCormick, for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Medina.
Yeah, I think in the presented bylaw, it's taking what's up on the website. It doesn't have what we passed, I believe it was in January of 2020, that indicates that we review this every July. So I think I had sent you that language, Superintendent Trinnell. That's language that we approved already in the past, but it's not posted here, and it's also not included in this version that's being presented. I just want to clarify that and ask that we.
Apologies. Yes, we can make that if you would like to consider an amendment. And then I will make sure that that is captured unless the board chooses to bring this back to a future meeting.
I could bring up the language. I have it saved here just to read it. And so we could approve. Let me just bring it up here. Bylaws. So after on the second paragraph, after compensation, monthly rate of compensation, language that we had previously approved, it says the board will consider an increase annually at the first regular board meeting in July. An increase made pursuant to this subdivision shall be effective upon approval by the board. That was the language that we previously approved, but just hasn't been updated on the website. So I guess the motion would be to amend this presented document to include the language that we previously approved that should be in there.
Are there any other questions before we go to public comment and or make a motion? Okay, let's go to public comment.
If there are members on Zoom that would like to make a public comment on E6, first read and possible waiver of second read of Board Bylaw 9250, please raise your virtual hand at this time. There are no hands raised.
Great, thank you. I'm going to bring it back to you, Director Flores, and hope that you'll make the motion. I'm sorry, Medina. Sensing your presence, looking the
Like you said his name, but you're looking at me.
Since you have the language right there and with the amendment, could you make the motion?
Okay, I would like to move that we waive second reading and approve the update to bylaw 9250 to increase from 463.05 to 486.20, the monthly compensation amount, and to add the language that we previously adopted in the second paragraph, which states that the board will consider an increase annually at the first regular board meeting in July. An increase made pursuant to this subdivision shall be effective upon approval by the board.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion with an amendment made by Director Medina, a second by Director Flores. Call for the vote.
Director Bowie,
Aye.
Director Medina,
Aye.
Director Flores,
Aye.
Director De La Cruz,
Aye.
Director Fung,
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to E7, action item. Emergency resolution delegating authority to the superintendent to take necessary action to protect students and staff from the spread of the coronavirus COVID-19. I will turn this over to our superintendent.
Thank you so much, Vice President McCormick. As has happened in recent years, an emergency resolution to provide the superintendent the opportunity to take action when necessary prior to the ability to be at a board meeting to request such action has been necessary in the past, given the fact that we are continuing to deal with COVID-19 and then the necessity to perhaps purchase PPE and take other actions perhaps more immediately than when a board meeting might occur. I do request that the board consider approving this emergency resolution so that if necessary, I can take appropriate action, keeping in mind that I would still need to take into consideration any laws and guidelines that would govern such a motion in order to do so. And with that, I ask the board to consider approval of resolution number 2022-23-10, declaring emergency conditions exist in Santa Rosa City Schools and authorizing myself to take action if necessary to respond to the effects of COVID-19. Thank you.
Hey, any questions from the board? Dr. Medina.
Yeah, I was just curious. I thought I remember that we maybe passed something similar in the past. If we didn't, okay, but I'm just wondering, is this limited to a specific period of time or is this just like a forever authority?
This is for this school year, 22-23.
Sorry, the language of the resolution actually says until appealed by formal board action.
Oh, yes, that too. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Sure. So it actually is in effect until we repeal it. Actually, that language is interesting because I feel like it should actually track the declaration of emergency at the state or county level. And when those declarations of emergencies end, then this would also end this kind of delegation of authority. So that would be my recommendation on that question. I had a very similar question, Omar.
Any other questions?
I actually had.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure that in the delegation of our authority, that it's not necessarily the delegation of our authority and then we lose it moving forward. It would just to essentially supplement Superintendent Trinnell's authority in the case that we are not available for essentially kind of validation of the action or approval of the action. And so I'm wondering, is there something that in this resolution requires us to approve at the next possible board meeting, or is this just a kind of a clear delegation of all authorities related to the emergency?
This is just to provide clarity on that delegation.
Meaning that if you had to make an emergency decision, it would be something that would come to the board like the very next meeting, or if we have a
Yes.
special board meeting or whatever, and then we would proceed, approve,
Yes,
whatever.
sorry,
Okay,
Yes.
so
not
that
being very clear.
yeah, that language isn't in here about kind of the board's validation of such emergency authority, or like the clarity around when you would be exercising the delegation of the board's authority versus, in the course of your regular responsibilities of running this entire district, which are massive. And so I guess I'm just trying to make sure that we're clear how we're pulling apart what duties we are delegating to you, how we understand when you're exercising the authority delegated to you by the board versus your regular, amazing, incredible administrative job of running this district. And that's also kind of a piece that isn't clearly identified in this resolution.
Thank you. And I think I'm being very linear sequential in my thinking about the document, and just having sort of a clean, updated version since it is a new school year, recognizing that we are still dealing with COVID, but also recognizing that the former language in last year's resolution even suggested that that document could have been ongoing. So I think there's a recognition of that. And then also, yes, in any case, and I'm open to entertaining any additional language, just really honestly using our template from before. But anytime we have major decisions, we would always bring those forward to the next board meeting to ensure that it is a part of the public discussion and that people can understand actions that were taken.
Excellent. I appreciate that. So I'm just wondering with those, does the full board feel like we need to take action or modify this resolution in some way to have it end when the emergency declaration at the state or county level ends, rather than just kind of on into the future without repealed through board action?
Will the state finally make such a declaration?
So typically in emergencies, there is an end of the declaration of emergency, at which point much of the delegated authorities that are given by policymakers to folks, implementing typically, rather than making policy themselves, that authority then closes with the end of the declaration or with the end of the emergency. So I'm suggesting that we do something similar where we're tracking the end of this resolution, the end of this delegated authority to the end of the declaration of emergency.
I think if I may, I think where I saw that as a potential is under the be it further resolved and ordered section that says, should any portion of this resolution be held invalid, the invalidity shall not affect other provisions, etc. And then without the invalid provisions or application, and to this end, the provisions of this resolution are declared to be severable. And so I think I saw that as if there was any piece of action that would have been taken under an emergency, if that emergency were to be removed, for example, then, and that's just how I interpreted it.
Yeah, no, that's actually the severability clause that just says that if any pieces of the resolution are found to be invalid, the pieces are invalid, but the resolution stands.
Mhm.
The language that I'm suggesting be modified is the last be it further resolved and ordered, where shall remain in effect for the entirety of the state declaration of emergency, declaration of the COVID-19 emergency, rather than until repealed by formal board action.
I understand now.
I'm wondering, Allegria, in that next to the last paragraph, be it further resolved, that we are in charge of when it ends, not the state.
Okay.
I would be kind of in line with what you're saying, Director Fong, because I feel like that there is an end date to it. It's the end of the school year. And if there's anything we know about trying to educate during this pandemic is that we seem like things are coming to a close and then they're not. And so I'd like to I am comfortable with it as written, one, because we've used this template before, and two, it just gives us the wiggle room to get through the end of the school year. If something changes, like all of a sudden emergency's off, emergency's back on, and then we don't have to come back in and do another resolution. I am comfortable with the way it's written, and it does have an end date, the end of the school year. And then if not, we could redo it again, but.
I don't see that end date of the end of the school year.
It's not in there.
Superintendent Trinnell, didn't you say this is just for this school year? Because it says 22-23 emergency resolution
That's how I interpret it for the 22-23 school year resolution number. I'm also happy to help with making it more clear.
So the resolution number is just when it was presented. It means it's the 10th resolution of this academic year. It
Correct.
doesn't mean the period that it serves for. But I think in relation to the second issue that Director De La Cruz brought up, I think board policy 20, what is it, 20? Hold on, let me bring it up again. 2210 might also cover the part about reporting back at the next, as soon as possible after an action is taken. That might cover that part of it. But I'm still with Director De La Cruz in terms of like a period of time for this resolution. I mean, I don't know if it's urgent that we pass it at this meeting, but if not, I would kind of feel better if it just came back at the next meeting with just that updated language addressing those two issues, unless it's really urgent, then that's my 2 cents.
I think it's important as staff or policymakers on the other side of my world. I think it's really important that Superintendent Trinnell have this delegated authority to prepare for school opening. So if there's something that needs to happen in the next 2 weeks before our board meeting, the day before school starts, right? She would have that delegated authority in these 2 weeks that I think is really critical to make decisions that might pop up in the course of trying to go back to school. So I actually think that we do need to pass this resolution tonight. But I just, that language was just a question for me. And if we're okay with it living until we repeal it, I'm fine with that too. I just wanted to raise it. And then Omar, I wasn't sure, Director Medina, I wasn't sure where you said that you found the language around kind of reporting back to the board when the delegated authority was exercised. That was in a different resolution.
And no, this is in the board policy 2210 under administration. The superintendent shall be accountable to the board for all areas of operation under his or her authority. As appropriate, the superintendent or designee shall notify the board as soon as practicable after he or she exercises the authority granted under this policy. So, it's just in relation to administration. So any actions that they would take, they would have to report to us. And it says the board president and the superintendent shall schedule review of the action at the next regular board meeting. So I think that language kind of addresses that if something needs to come to us. So that's already in board policy.
May I offer a suggestion? Given the fact that the other resolution is technically from last August, is technically still in action. I would much prefer to have the additional suggested language in a revised resolution to make sure that it's very clear, and perhaps even because I think there's the mixing of understanding versus what is written based on what Director Medina just read, so that we can make it super clear. So that would be potential suggestion from me.
I love that. That's very elegant. So you already have the authority because the other resolution hasn't expired or been repealed. So you're good for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll come back on the 10th and just clean this one up. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the thought partnership.
So that being said, if there's no one's going to make a motion on this right now, do we still go to public comment?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so let's go to public comment.
If you're attending the meeting on Zoom and you would like to make a public comment on item E7, please raise your virtual hand at this time. There are no hands raised.
So do we need a motion just to table this item?
That would be great. Thank you.
Move to table item E7.
Second.
Okay, motion by Director Medina, second by Director Flores. Call for the vote.
Director Bowie. Director Medina.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Fong.
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. Thank you. We will table E7 and return to it later. Okay, we got 16 minutes. I believe we can do this. I really do. Okay,
Brother.
so E8, action item, public board meetings via teleconference per AB 361. So this is back up.
Can we
per
just
our
move?
timeline.
Can I just make a motion to,
And let Superintendent Trinelli, you want to say anything on this or? can we
No,
just make
the only thing is just acknowledging that the board requested this be the last item in the list of E's, and so therefore it is.
thank
Okay.
you. So I'd like to
I
move
appreciate
to-
that. Thank you.
I'd like to move to continue conducting public meetings virtually, including the use of a hybrid model pursuant to AB 361.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Director De La Cruz, second by Director Fong. Ready for the vote?
Do
We need
to-
public comment first.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Thank you.
Are there any members attending on Zoom and would like to make a public comment? Please raise your hand at this time. Our first public comment is Shelby Pryor.
Thank you, board, for going ahead and continuing to allow us to come and speak with you in person where we can have these tough conversations. I appreciate that very much so. I obviously have had some words for some of you members on the board, and it's due to the lack of transparency of having these conversations. What you guys have accomplished tonight is proof that you're getting a little bit closer to going ahead and giving us the opportunity to have these conversations and be in person and be able to see our emotions and understand us as human beings. This is a very good close step to equity and equality. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That is something that means something to us. Even if I'm hard-headed and I don't follow all of your rules, I'm just trying to express upon you that you understand that there are members in this community who don't feel the way that you guys do, but we still want to be able to come to the table and have these discussions and make you think about them, and maybe we can come back to them later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vice President McCormick.
Okay, so I
Just
think
one
we had
thing.
a motion is, oh, we have
There's a comment.
comment.
I just want to appreciate that we are continuing hybrid because I know a lot of other districts in the state who are no longer doing hybrid. And if they're in person, everybody has to be in person and no one can watch on Zoom. No one can make comments online anymore. I really like that we are living our values, that we are allowing more people to watch, listen, and comment. It's important to us.
Can I make one more comment? I just also want to thank staff for building agendas that are manageable to end before 10 p.m. That is also a really critical piece of public transparency that allows for people not to be up all night, including board members trying to make decisions until the wee hours of the morning. So just also a giant dose of gratitude for staff for making these meetings so much more sustainable for us as a community, not just board members, as a
Okay,
community.
aye.
Okay, you're going to take us to that 10-minute mark. Okay, so we already have a motion and a second, so.
Director Bowie. Aye. Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Fong.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. E8 passes. Okay, so I would like to entertain a motion to approve items F1 through 21.
I'd like to
move.
move to approve F1 through 21.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Director De La Cruz and second was Director Medina.
Director Bowie. Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Director Fong.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Vice President McCormick.
Aye. We are moving on to our G item. Are there any requests for information from the board members? Director Flores.
Yes, let's see. Yeah, I was looking to see if we can have an update on Is there going to be a graduation 3.0 for this school year? I'd like to have data to see how many of our students are on track for graduation this year. I'd like to get that, start that as soon as possible instead of waiting until December to get that information. And then two, this is just a point of personal privilege. I like being able to push this button whenever I can, right? I think we're respectful enough to not interrupt each other, unlike some other school boards that I've seen. Can we do this also when we have our technology in Santa Rosa High School or any other high school? Because being muted when the president's talking or somebody else is talking is very cumbersome. So I just like us to be able to, as elected officials, being able to do that whenever we need to voice our opinions. And I think we're, respectful enough to let someone finish.
What are you talking about?
So for Santa Rosa High School, right? So thank you.
Anybody else request for information? Okay, just pointing out, we have some informational items under H here. We have future board discussion items, board conduct and code of ethics, our educational acronyms and abbreviations, and then our Williams Settlement Quarterly Report are all on there. And anything else, Superintendent Trinnell, for the good of the order?
Yes, thank you. Just a point of clarity on what Director Flores was just mentioning for requests for information. I don't know if this is out of order, but I apologize. On the update on graduation 3.0, are you referring to ISP?
Yes, an IGP.
Excuse me,
Yes.
IGP. Yes, okay, thank you. And then I believe what you're referring to is the technology that we use when we're at Santa Rosa High School with the clicking of the speakers. So what I'm hearing is a potential request to purchase different equipment.
If need be.
Thank you for
thank you.
that clarity.
All right, with that, at 9:51, meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.